after I introduce.
You just maximize this right here. Oh, scroll to the right here. I got you. I got you. And ready. I know it's going to be a little bit difficult. The next folks who begin to speak have a microphone, but we're running a little bit late getting started, and Robert has a packed agenda today. But we want to go ahead and get started. There are some people who have been caught in traffic. You may have noticed construction around Hazard here and on the other way. My name is Jeff Hawkins. I'm the director at Kentucky Valley Education Cooperative. On behalf of our 22-member board of directors, many of whom are in the room with us today, we want to welcome you here. We really appreciate the opportunity to learn with you and learn from you today. We believe that this is a real opportunity for all of us in education as we look toward personalized professional growth. This year has been a little bit of a taxing year, not just in Kentucky, but across the country. We've had tragedy, we've had loss of life, and it is a reminder always for us that the most important thing we do is serve children and serve communities. Because of that, as we begin this morning, if you would join me, let's take a few seconds and pause for reflection about what causes us to do this work and about those events that have happened in our state and across the country that are really reminders about why this is the most important work that takes place in our country today. So if you will, join me for a few seconds of reflection. I do appreciate that moment of silence and a look back as we begin to look forward. I'm going to introduce Robert in just a minute, but before I do that, I want to offer you a bit of information about why we are engaged in this work here at KVEC. KVEC is deeply rooted in place. We represent Eastern Kentucky, and that is who we are. Those are our folks. Our kids are the best kids in the United States of America and across the world. We have the best educators, and if you don't believe that about where you're from, then we probably need to have a conversation. We believe in where we are, and we would not be anywhere else. There's an old saying in our area about breaking new ground. When folks garden and have to raise food for themselves, every year, every growing season, they carve out a little bit of new ground that they can plant because they're always looking for expansion. We take that term to heart. At KVEC, we believe that we are constantly breaking new ground in ways that we can better serve children and the adults who work with them every day. For us, micro-credentialing is a major component of the work that we see going forward to continue to make teachers and educators and leaders the best that they can possibly be in a professional atmosphere and in a professional way that's accessible to everyone. So we are rooted where we are who we are, and we represent the folks in our community. And we believe that this is one more excellent example of how we can serve the needs of learners in our community. I want to introduce Robert Brown to you. Many of you already know Robert. You have probably received multiple emails from him about this event today. We are so proud that Robert is a part of our team here at KVEC. He has incredible experiences, is a consummate educator, believes that every decision that is made, you should run it through the filter of how does this affect children first. And if you will, for all of his hard work and the work that will continue to move forward, put your hands together with me for Robert.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Again, this day is about you, and I'm so excited because there are so many people from across the nation that are sitting in this audience. And I can't tell how overwhelmed I feel to be standing in front of such an eclectic group of people, such a great group of educators whose main soul and goal in life is how do we make life better for children. So give yourselves a hand for that, please. I'm proud of our profession. Our profession is what makes our country run. You make our country run. You make it great for our kids. You're awesome. We want awesome students. And to get through the awesome students, we have to have awesome educators, and that's what we're all about too. As you look around the room, you'll see the work that's posted, and that's there to show everything we talk about today, even though it's professional learning for our educators, it's focused on how can we give our educators the best tools they need to give our students the best experiences of their life. So that's why you'll see all the student work. And if we have time today and you want to do some gallery walks, you'll see some things out there. We have lunch as well later today. Please take time to review what the students have done, as well as the video that we'll be showing through lunch, etc. A couple of housekeeping things. Restrooms, if you have not found them, can be straight through the door there. Women, you'll have to take a little bit longer walk to go up the hall a little. So we're going to do the rules of 2 feet as we move forward. If we have time with them, we'll try to take a restroom break. If not, we'll do a stretch break. I do want to make sure that I eradicate deep vein thrombosis, one gold noodle activity at a time. So we will have a couple of gold noodle activities, and some of you are looking at me now going, I hate that man. And some of you are going, he hate gold noodle. That's because you're weird. But anyway, so we were going to have a great day, and I appreciate you being here. And as we go through, and I show you some of the folks that are here, I might have you raise your hand so you can see from what directions they come. So for framing the day, this is about you. I hope you find an exciting day. I hope you get a lot of participation. So when we think about what are our purposes for being here, and looking at our guiding questions, is how can microcredentials be an integral component of a continuous educator professional learning system? What are policy implications regarding microcredentials? And I'm going to tell a short story about policy. My sons, on 2 different occasions as they went up in growing up, went up to my wife and said, Mom, are we going to be as nerdy as Dad when we grow up? Because I've never seen a man get excited about policy. That's just, I said, well, she said, I hope you do. Anyway, and what initiatives are currently underway around the nation, and how can we learn from them and continue to build on successes? We have some dynamic speakers here that I'll introduce momentarily that will address these issues, especially the third point. Again, as you look around this room with these questions, this is a networking opportunity for you as well. In your packets of materials on the right side, you will find the participants in the room. I want you to use this day to start reaching out to those folks via Twitter, emailing throughout the day and say, hey, we need to talk. Or if you've noticed their names, I want to meet you in person. You're here today. let's get that meeting done. That's a perfect place to do it. And when you think about micro-credentialing as a conversation for today, micro-credentialing is only one component of a larger continuous professional framework. So when you look at this, the effective educators equal successful students. Micro-credentialing is listed as only one component of that work. But through micro-credentialing, it kind of webs out because there's networking involved with that. There's facilitative coaching. There's online capability for that. There's all kinds of community outreach that can be possibilities. There's educational partnerships. How can we work with universities with this particular professional learning? How can we work with state agencies? How can we work with policy on these things? So as a framework, micro-credential is one component of a larger ecosystem. And that's what we're focusing on today. But please keep that in mind. This is one component that extends to multiple components within a large ecosystem. So they are digital form of certification. They're shareable, they're competency-based, they're personalized, and they're on-demand and shareable. I did a presentation not too long ago, and I asked some folks, before I begin, tell me what professional learning means to you. So they wrote down their answers. We went around the room, they said, oh, they got to be competency-based. They got to be personalized for that teacher. They got to be something I can share. They got to be something I can be proud of. They have to be something I can recognize that I'm doing these great things for my students. Boom. There's the definition. And we have some teachers and educators we're going to hear from later talk about how that's impacting their schools. It's rather about learning by watching. How many of you have gone through over and over the seat time? So yeah, I wish there was something for me, but I have to sit through this, get my 6 hours. Because in Kentucky, you're required to get 24 credit or seat hours of time annually for your professional development. We're looking at moving towards a professional learning system and hopefully eventually get away from thinking about numbers of seat hours. But what's the quality of the professional learning, whether it be micro-credentials or anything else, that's impacting students in that classroom. That's what we're about, and that's what we're trying to work with our folks at state departments. And I've had questions or conversations with our folks. Jimmy Adams of EPSB's here. We've had the conversation. Folks from KDE's here. David Cook here yet? He maybe, I know I saw a KD person. There he is. So we've had these conversations so that we can have our work, how does it impact policy, professional learning. And educators apply their learnings to practice and collect evidence. I see these as little mini national boards. So I always try to promote national board. And I'll say, if you're interested in national board and you're not real comfortable about that whole process, go through the micro-credentialing process. Get some of that experience of data collection, analyzing your data, videotaping, and then bring up your confidence and then move forward. And we do have folks from National Board here, and I know there's some folks that are facilitating at the table that are going through the process right now. So for KBEC, the process here began about 3 years ago. We contracted with Digital Promise for 5 micro-credentials. There are 4. We have charts that have the 4. Jennifer Carroll, I think she's hiding around over there. She's been working for others to create micro-credentials, and there are 4 currently on Digital Promise's website for us, and they're listed there as well with the website where those can be found. So with our involvement, we currently have over 60% of our teachers in Owsley County who have gone through the micro-credential process and have received some micro-credential. We have 14 activating catalytic transformation schools that are using micro-credentials as they identify a problem of practice and then work on the theory of action using micro-credentials as well of how to address their learning needs. We do give some compensation for that by giving them $1,000 to spread among the educators who are achieving the micro-credentials, etc. And we have individual teachers completing and sending micro-credentials for assessing. One of the things that we'll be working on and talking about with others is, with that assessment piece, how can we get teachers to go through, have theirs assessed, and then later become assessors and strengthen and grow their knowledge of micro-credentials, but generally and just in professional learning with micro-credentials. There are a lot of policy implications here. You notice all the states that are listed. There's an EG. That means for example. That's because I can't remember all the folks from all the states with whom I've been speaking. And instead of going through back all my emails, I list off memory. So if you're from one of the states listed, could you raise your hand, please? Excellent, thank you. Is anyone here from a state that's not listed?
Robert.
What state you from? Arizona. Shame on me for forgetting Arizona. All right? So, and I was hoping that would happen. But there's lots of states talking, and some of them will be here later. We do have other educators coming, but today happens to be a student assessment day. So they are finishing assessments with their students. Then they're going to come in a little bit later as we go. We've had conversations with our standards board and our Department of Education, state legislators, national organizations. CCSSO has been having conversations and summits with around credentials with KVEC. We've had conversations with university faculty members. We'll be providing concurrent session at NASDAQ coming up in June on micro-credentials in Minneapolis. So there is national conversation, and if you haven't been part of that conversation yet, you are now a part of that conversation. So and it is exciting. These are some of the partners with whom help fund our work and support our work. So I just wanted to say hats off to them and thank them for all their support of everything that we do. So to guide us throughout the day, we're going to begin with Matt DeLevy at the Impact Lab at Rec University of Virginia. He's got some exciting information to share with you. Michelle Mills will be presenting next from the Department of Education, talking about their pilot work and how that's impacting professional learning there. Gary Chapman from the Center for Collaborative Education over here. I was afraid I was going to miss him because he got caught in the GPS loop, was headed to West Virginia, I found out. So I'm very happy you're here. So I stopped sweating once I saw your face, so that's good. So I'm glad you're here. Jennifer Cobbleton from Digital Promise, flying in from California, as well as some other folks from Golf who are from California. Then we have a nice educator panel from several districts talking about micro-credentials. Jennifer Carroll, again, over in the corner. She will be finishing up the day with us, talking about what's happening with our districts in KVEC, our partners, and the work that we're doing. But most importantly, your participation in all this is utmost important. We want you to have conversations with each other. We want you to have conversations with the speakers and interact. And if there are things you want to talk about as we go through, we have a parking lot over there. The arrow does not mean put your parking lot at the top of the wall, as someone suggested it might mean. But just cover up that little parking lot with whatever you need, and we'll begin our day. So, and at the end of the day, we're going to have some reflection questions, and we'll get that started. So, coming up next, if I can get this to work, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, and that's Matt DeLevy. Matt is the Executive Director of the Impact Program at Raffle University in Virginia. He is currently the Principal Investigator on the $13.9 million U.S. Department of Education grant called the Appalachian. Now notice what I said, Appalachian. There is a T in there. It's invisible, but it's there. Appalachian Support for Specialized Education Training. ASSET includes the development, implementation, and evaluation of online, self-paced, competency-based training designed to increase teacher effectiveness and workforce capacity in underserved rural communities in Appalachia. From 2006 to 2007, he was a postdoctoral fellow in learning technologies at Harvard Graduate School of Education and the director of the Handheld Augmented Reality Project. Dr. DeLevy received his PhD in Educational Research, Statistics, and Evaluation at the University of Virginia. Prior to completing his formal education, he lived overseas, teaching English as a second language in Cameroon, Central Africa, as a Peace Corps volunteer, and then independently in Taiwan, Republic of China. So, pleasure that we introduce Dr. Matt DeLevy.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. And while we're doing the presentation setup,
I had the opportunity to come and meet with Robert and Jeff and the rest of their team, Jennifer. What a special team and what a special place. Before I ever met anybody, I immediately walked in and I could tell just by the way they had set their physical structure that it was going to be a unique experience. So I'd like to start my presentation, thank you, with a round of applause just thanking them for putting us all in the same room. It's an exciting time. As Robert said, I'm Matt Dunleavy. I'm the Executive Director of the Impact Lab at Radford University. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. So I've got 3 primary objectives with the next 20 minutes. I'm going to talk at you for about 20 minutes and then open it up for discussion for another 20 to 25. I think I have 40, 45 minutes. First, I want to give you an overview of asset and what asset is. I also want to have a conversation about what is our understanding of micro-credentials and competency-based learning. And then what I'd like to do is situate that within a larger national conversation that a lot of us are having. Robert mentioned that we were awarded a seed grant. I know Erica and her team were also recipients of that. And for me, it's an exciting time. It's also a little scary because it's very emergent. And quite frankly, I'll speak for myself. I don't think anybody, quite frankly, knows exactly how this is going to turn out and what it looks like. We know what it looks like right now. So what I'd like to do is invite all of us as we move through this is to think about how can we work together to define this field as it emerges, because it is, in my opinion, very emergent. So this is part of a larger initiative called the Impact Lab, and we set forth 2 objectives when we launched Impact about 1 year and 3 months ago. We wanted to empower working adults with career advancing skills, and we also wanted to strengthen our strategic partners workforce. We work in 3 main areas: cybersecurity, geospatial intelligence, and education. And the cybersecurity initiative has been launched. That was our first initiative. And as we were using this online competency-based approach to train working adults, that's when we wrote the grant proposal, and that's when we were awarded the money to use that same exact approach to train 5,000 teachers throughout Appalachia. And so these are our roots, and we really do use a business-to-business approach. We sign strategic partnerships with organizations and businesses in 7 different states now to train up their employees on different skill sets. So asset. Asset really set forth trying to solve a rural Appalachian problem. But before I begin, what I'd like to do is pose these questions to you, and as I present, think about these questions and think about what they mean. So number 1, what is a micro-credential, and what is competency-based education? They're relatively new fields in some ways, and in some ways, competency-based training and education has been around for decades. So what does it really mean? What value can they bring to teacher preparation and professional development? How can your organization work with Impact or any of the other organizations in here? I had the opportunity to meet Jennifer from Digital Promise. It's definitely something I'm very interested in, figuring out how Digital Promise we could work with that great organization. And then what are some ideas and concerns that you have about and around micro in CBEs? Because I have some concerns. Let's be blunt. Some of it's market, some of it's sizzle, and some of it's real and potentially highly transformative. And we need to be candid about where those begin and end. So what problem are we trying to solve with asset? There's a systemic challenge within rural schools. You're as familiar with this as I am. And we're using the Appalachian Regional Commission's definition for Appalachia. It's 13 states. And in those 13 states, we see that teachers in rural areas increasingly come under pressure to meet ever-increasing diversity in their classroom. And sometimes they don't have the training they need. Sometimes they don't have a paraprofessional. Sometimes there's not a special education professional in the building. And so it's really dependent upon the general education teacher to do that. That same teacher often lacks access to high-quality professional development. So that's the problem. And just so you know where we're situated, right now we're in Hazard, Kentucky, and Radford University is in Southwestern Virginia. So just give you a context for where I'm coming from. Southwestern Virginia is our backyard. Radford University has been training teachers for 108 years to serve primarily in this region of the country. And we're proud of that. We're proud to be building upon that foundation and extending it with new technologies. So when we set forth, we were like, well, let's provide effective and engaging professional development to teachers and administrators so that they can reach and teach all of their students. And we're using a very broad definition of inclusive practices. It's not necessarily code for special education or 504 plans or IEPs. It really is about how can we use Universal design for learning principles to reach and teach all the kids in your classroom, regardless of where they're coming from or what their abilities are. Because it's a U.S. Department of Education grant, all counties and schools in Appalachia, it's completely free for those schools for the duration of the grant. And we're obviously in our first year of the grant, and it goes until 2020. And of course, as I'm sure a lot of you in this room know, the last seed grant was due last week. How many of you applied for that one? Just one? That's surprising. Okay, well, I hope you win as long as we win too. But it is funded and free for all of Appalachia. So it's federally subsidized by the U.S. government as well as the cost share in kind that Radford University is bringing to it. It's all focused on competency. So what do we mean by that? It's a very simplistic definition. We're focused on specific job skills needed for someone to complete a critical task in the workplace. In this case, teachers in the classroom, but also administrators, because the research shows that if administrators aren't privy to what the teachers are doing, familiar with the techniques, and supportive of those techniques, then the ability to sustain that initiative, whatever it might be, usually is very, very limited. So we are opening it up to administrators as well, and so that's an exciting evolution. We also want to recognize that our teachers and administrators come to us with a wealth of expertise and talent and just in strong pedagogical practice already. So we want to recognize that. And so we're building in prior learning assessments, pre-tests, if you will, where they can earn micro-credentials based upon their own already existing expertise. We know we're working with very busy teachers and administrators. So all of our content's delivered online, completely asynchronous, i.e. self-paced. Most of us, this is my life. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. My wife and I, we work. We do about a 60 to 70-hour week. We come home at the end of the night. You feed your kids. You put them to bed. You got about 2 to 4 hours to yourself before you got to go to bed yourself and do it all over again. That probably sounds pretty familiar to most of you. So in order for us to design effective training, it has to be on demand when I can get to it, when the teacher can get to it. That enables anytime, anywhere learning. And so 30 minutes during lunch, maybe 2 hours while your kid's in Taekwondo. Maybe it's an intensive experience over 3 months during the summer when you've got some downtime. Whenever the teacher needs it, the training is there. They can pick up and leave where they left off. We're going to build a robust community of practice. My dream is in 3 years, we've got teachers in Mississippi, communicating with teachers in Hazard, Kentucky, communicating with teachers in southwestern Virginia, communicating with teachers in Pennsylvania. And my definition of Appalachia has expanded just in this project because I had no idea there were areas of Pennsylvania that were part of Appalachia, but we already have teachers in our first cohort from that state, and that's exciting. All of our content is based upon the Institute of Educational Sciences What Works Clearinghouse. I just realized my phone is sitting next to the mic and vibrating. It's like, that's a loud vibrate. It's got a powerful phone. It's based upon the Institute of Educational Sciences What Works Clearinghouse guides, moderate to strong evidence to get in there that's usually experimental, randomized clinical trials, or quasi-experimental. So there's strong quantitative efficacy studies that support the practices that are in these guides. And we use these guides to inform the techniques that we are embedding within our practice. That's important, and I think that's one of the reasons why the U.S. government was interested in it. Another side objective of this grant is really to disseminate these guides. Regardless of asset or impact, these are very powerful and useful guides, and the statistics that I've seen is there's not a large uptake in integration of these practice guides, and so that is another objective of ours is to serve as a dissemination model. And we've also partnered with Sim School. So Sim School creates a simulated teaching environment. And so there's 2 forms of assessments. We have objective assessments within the learning management system, but then we actually have performance assessments that the teachers have to go into a simulated teaching environment, practice the skills, and demonstrate mastery of the competencies therein before they unlock the next module. So what is our definition of micro-credentials? And you'll start to see, I'm going to start to do like pattern recognition now. You should start to see some of the same patterns come up. Let me skip back one. So our micro-credentials result from short, i.e. 1 to 5 hours of contact time, professional development. It's all self-paced, it's all competency-based. These can be stacked or combined with other micro-credentials to create personalized learning paths. They're also shareable. And at the conclusion of a micro-credential, An individual is awarded a visual indicator, i.e. a badge, representing their mastery of the competency therein. So what do we mean by stack? So these are the first 5 stacks, and these are shorthand. Each of you have a brochure on your table that outlines exactly what's in our first stack. Feel free, and if you want to take some more brochures back to your schools, I can give you more. But these are shorthand. So our first stack is going to be inclusive practices in the elementary math classroom for general educators. So an individual teacher could theoretically say, I want to do every single micro-credential in that stack. Or an individual teacher could personalize their learning path and say, you know what I want to really do is I want to do 2 micro-credentials from inclusive math, I want to do 2 micro-credentials from inclusive literacy, and I want to do 3 micro-credentials from inclusive problem solving. So that frees the teacher up to create his or her own personalized learning path. Take it one step further, a building level administrator or a district level super or a state level super would say, I want every single one of my elementary teachers to do this personalized stack. So you think about administrators could personalize their own PD as well. The grand vision on this would be to have approximately 50 to 60 micro-credentials designed over the course of 3 years. And then you could not have an infinite number of stacks or personalized paths, but you could have a fair number of personalized paths there. Again, a visual indicator of what's taking place, what competencies they've mastered, be embedded with metadata such as the issuer, time, place, etc. I know Digital Promise has done significant groundbreaking work in this area. I think this is one of the more interesting aspects of this entire field, is the currency of a badge. What the credibility and validity of a badge is, that still is very, I think, in flux. That's my take on it. But we want to add to that and contribute to that knowledge base if we can. So our first 2 micro-credentials, as I mentioned, the first one's going to be inclusive practices in math, general education classrooms. It's going to be approximately 10 micros. They'll range from 1 to 5 hours of contact time. And so you can think about a teacher could invest 1 hour, come out with a micro, invest 5 hours, come out with a micro, just leave it. He or she could then continue on, more micros, or they could just leave it there. Our goal first year was to recruit 415 teachers throughout Appalachia. We've surpassed that. We're now up to 460 as of this morning. Over 3 years, we'll recruit 5,000. And so we're already starting to recruit for year 2, and our goal for that is 2,500 teachers. And I would love some of your teachers to join us in that. Our second micro is going to be inclusive practices in literacy. In year 1, these micros will be worth professional development points in some states. That goes towards relicensure. That's the way it works in Virginia. You have approximately 180 hours of contact time with professional development every 3 years for renewal. In year 2, we'll actually provide graduate credit. So individuals who get the micros will receive graduate credit, and they can apply that towards a master's degree if they're choosing. This is a very rough breakdown of the first micro-credential. It ranges, for first micro-credential stack, it ranges from an overview of universal design for learning principles and drills down into what are some specific classroom management techniques I can use to manage children who are acting out because they're frustrated, or acting out because they're not understanding the concepts, etc. Very practical techniques. Our delivery approaches are as follows. We use a lot of video. We use expert scenarios. We have a cohort of advisory teachers and administrators, and we're actually videoing them in their classroom and working through different scenarios with their kids. We also have experts come in, subject matter experts, who instruct with interactive exercises. I've already mentioned we partner with the simulated teaching environment company, so you get practice in the class with feedback. To me, this is a very exciting research, but I'll be honest, we don't know a lot about this. And we need to, I don't want to stand up here and say, hey, we know everything about this and we've got to figure it out. We don't. And I think most of us don't. And I think that's part of the excitement of this, that we have to really be diligent about our research, evaluation about what we're doing, and I'll speak to that in a minute. And then, of course, we'll develop a community of practice. All of our content is grounded in the learning sciences. So the last 20 years and really 40 years, we've seen an explosion of what we know about how people learn. So if you're familiar with John Bransford's work in the National Resource Council, they published How People Learn in 1999. And that was a groundbreaking work in some ways because it really just compiled what we knew about how people learn and made it accessible. So if you haven't read that, chapter 6 is really the best chapter. You can skip the rest, and chapter 6 you can come away with the real essence of that book. It's free. It's federally subsidized. You can find it online and download it. Great book. But we have designed our own 75 principle learning diagnostic tool. And what we do is we actually use that for our instructional designers to look at how do we design a learning management system to be effective and engaging. We also use scenario-based, sim-based, and game-based learning principles when there's efficacy studies to support the use of that. And then we also have a relatively robust learning analytics engine that undergirds the entire system. So not only do we know when you're logging in, when you're logging out, we know how many minutes you've watched a certain video. We know at minute 3 of a certain video you accessed a certain resource. If you take a 5-item quiz and you get the first 3 correct, and it took you 8 seconds on average to get through those 3 items, and then on item 4 it took you 20 minutes, and you got it wrong 6 times before you got it right, that is data that we mine. And that could mean multiple things. It could mean on item 4, you got up to get a cup of coffee. And when you came back, you were just kind of lost. Or it could mean that we didn't teach it well. Or it could mean that the item, the assessment item, was poorly constructed, poorly written. It could mean 4 or 5 other things. But my point is, we use that research, and we use that data to improve the system and remediate, reteach, and then hopefully move the learner on. All right, so I will stop very briefly and then say, okay, how is this framed and how is it situated within a larger national conversation around micro-credentials, and then what is the state of the field? And this is where I invite my colleagues in the room who, you'll see some slides from Digital Promise. I want you to join the conversation after I present to say, am I representing it correctly? And is it really the state of the field? Or is there something that I missed? So here's one model that we have, and this is the asset model, the impact model, but it maps very closely to the Digital Promise model, the Friday Institute model, the Quebec model. And so I'm going to try to draw some parallels here. So this is the Digital Promise, and I pulled this off of the website. By the way, when I use a source, it'll be at the bottom of my screen, and I'm happy to share my slides as well as all the resources that I've used in putting it together. But you'll notice it has the same 4 characteristics as most of them: competency-based, on-demand, personalized, shareable. And then one word that I've highlighted here, because I started to see this, is they recognize. And I think that's key, that's a strength. They're recognizing the expertise and the skills that teachers bring to their environment. And then they collect the required evidence and submit it online for assessment. If we look at the Tennessee Education Acceleration Model in the team, is anybody here from team? Great. So, and again, I invite you to say, yes, that's accurate, or no, you missed it because we just updated the website, or what have you, but I pulled these just a few days ago. Again, competency-based, self-paced, personalized, shareable. And again, you see this word recognition. So it's the model, and this is where you can correct me, but it seems to be the model is the teachers or educators compile a set of artifacts. They then would submit that to your organizations. You then work with professional assessors, most of whom I think are actual educators with a deep amount of expertise themselves. They use a rubric to then look at that work, and then based upon the criteria of the rubric, they would then say, yes, you've met the bar or not. Is that relatively accurate? So that's a really important model, and I think a groundbreaking model in a lot of ways. So here's the Quebec. I just put this in this morning. But this seems to be a very similar model. Again, competency-based, personalized. And this is one that's new, job embedded, which I think is a great addition, because it reinforces that we want people to be rooted in their jobs, applying the skills that we're teaching them. But again, you start to see this recognition, and I think that's a key pattern. So what do we know about the field? It's pretty thin. And so this is just a little bit of research. Most of it is qualitative case study. I'm not disparaging qualitative case studies. The methodology I use for my dissertation, big proponent of it. However, we do need at some point to get quantitative efficacy studies on what we're doing. And I don't think we're there yet, but maybe some of you could correct me. What we know now is the teachers love it. And the 3 primary data points that are coming out of some of these studies, teachers like using micros. They think they're learning skills that are valuable and important, and they think that it's going to translate into increased student learning in their classrooms. So that's what's coming across. I see some nods there, so that's good. And Andy, it's Andy, right? Yes. Andy from RAND and I were talking yesterday. There's other sectors that have done a lot of research in this area. So health, and I know technical fields have done more work in micros than education has. We can learn from them. What do they do well? What do they do poorly? How can we do a better job? But right now, this seems to be the state. Early adopters are saying there's lots to learn. We're still figuring out how best to use it. And there's an emphasis on we need for more systemic research on micros and how they're actually manifesting in terms of outcomes. One thing that sets asset apart a little bit is that while we do recognize the teachers as they bring skills to our micro-credential system, we're also specifically designing the training and the professional development. So we're working with content area experts, subject matter experts, in designing the training in addition to creating prior learning assessments. And I know some other organizations are also doing that. Another strong component of what we do is we have a very robust research agenda. So these are three of the larger objectives. Research and iteratively develop specific CBE learning design principles that are associated with positive outcomes. Research and iteratively develop specific learning analytics. So what data is most critical to give to a teacher, but also what data is most critical for the instructional design team to increase learning. And then finally, validating, this is no small feat, actually validating the asset assessments. We're developing the assessments as we speak. So there's internal validity that we have to demonstrate, and there's external validity we have to demonstrate. So that's key. How many minutes do I have? 5 minutes?
About 5, to get them to start talking.
All right, sounds good. So let me put this very quickly within a larger national context, and I'll leave you with this. We're facing a problem in higher education. You've got increasing costs that are outpacing higher ed for a lot of people, and this is the context within which why CBE and micros have become attractive. You also have an increasing demand and dissatisfaction among employers that our graduates are not coming to work with the skills they need. We also have an increasing demand from the students and parents where they want more market education alignment. And then finally, the entire higher education system's not set up for the non-traditional student, not set up for the working teacher. 70% of college students now are non-traditional. What does that mean? They're not enrolled full-time, they are not living on campus, and they have jobs and families that compete for their time. And so we have to adjust accordingly. CBEs and micros are a component of that. I'm going to skip through these because basically I'm just saying CBEs are addressing that, and then I'll get to some interesting things. Clay Christensen, who read The Innovator's Dilemma by Clay Christensen? Okay, so basically the essence of it is CBE is highly disruptive. It's going to be disruptive to higher ed, and these are early days. And so I invite you to look at his work and see how the convergence of these 4 vectors, and again, I'm ripping through it, but I'll send you these slides if you're interested, how the convergence of those 4 vectors actually makes CBE right now pretty low quality and low cost, but eventually it's going to iterate its way to higher quality, and it will, per the theory, disrupt the entire sector. And this is the closing note. By a show of hands, how many of you played that game? In 1972, I'm dating myself, I was born in '69, but in 1972, that was the state of the art in games. Don't get fixated on the game component, get fixated on the evolution of the technology. In 2017, this is Call of Duty, top grossing game in the world. I want you to pay attention to 2 things. One, the evolution of the technology, going from here to here. But as educators, I could probably stand here and make a credible argument that this is one of the most advanced and sophisticated learning environments ever designed. You've got people collaborating in real time, constant flow of immediate feedback, put in front of the learner, the player, just at the edge of their zone of proximal development. They have a risk-free learning environment, and they have practice until mastery. That's a game. Now the content's not something I want my kid to learn, but the learning system is profound. This is a screenshot from a class I taught 2 years ago. This is a typical LMS, learning management system. They're not that more sophisticated than this. They may have some video in there, but this is basically where we are right now. This is Pong, right? You see the connection? But soon, Pong will quickly morph. When virtual reality hoods reach a price point below 300, and they're rapidly approaching that, and when a kid, a 19-year-old kid, or a 29-year-old person, or a 49-year-old person could put on an HTC Vive and be anywhere in the world, immersed in any environment they want to be in, learning with whomever they want, at whatever pace they want, suddenly this becomes highly transformative. And this is coming. It's not a matter of if, it's coming. The question is, how do we, as leaders in this field, actually add to that? So CVE right now is Palm. Micros are Palm right now. Let's be blunt. But pretty soon, they're going to be highly, highly sophisticated. And we need to be the people who add to that conversation. And I can't think of a more special treat than to do that from the heart of Appalachia. And with that, I will open it for questions. Or discussion. Yes, ma'am.
You described how you value through these micro-credentials the knowledge and experience that teachers bring or educators bring to learning. You described how you value the learning and experience educators bring to the micro-credential experience. Could you just specify a little bit about how that's done through
Sure.
the stacks?
Sure, so there's two models that we've seen. Western Governors University and Southern New Hampshire University they're leaders in competency-based education. And Western Governors University uses things called a prior learning assessment, so PLA. It's a pretest, and so basically, to answer your question directly, that's what that would look like. There would be a prior learning assessment that a teacher or educator would be able to go through at the beginning of a stack, and then if we do our job right, and those are correlated strongly with the content, with internal validity, then that assessment should be able to say they've already demonstrated mastery of the competencies within micro 1, 3, and 5. They just need to be presented with micro 2, 4, and 6. Yes, ma'am. And all of this is still under development. We're launching our first micro this year, September. As I mentioned, we have about 450, 460 teachers signed up. But we're in the process of developing the content. The reason why that's relevant is we just had a meeting with the superintendent of instruction for West Virginia 2 weeks ago. And one of the things in his team, and one of the things that came out of that conversation is, hey, pedagogy is great, but what we really need is math content. Our teachers are weak in certain areas of math. Can you inject more math content? So we've already adjusted accordingly. As we've contracted with the subject matter expert in math education, and we're actually making that more robust. The reason why I'm saying that is that I want this to be very collaborative. So if you're interested in collaborating, we're very interested in listening to what you think your needs are, and then potentially modifying what we're doing. Yes, ma'am.
And this is kind of conceptual and also opinion, but based on the research that is current on the.
You are being live streamed, so the mics are necessary.
Hello. Based on the research, and this is conceptual and also your opinion, but based on what research is saying about the impact of virtual reality and on the growth in brains of younger people, and given that younger people are adopting and adapting faster than we are, and that we would want this kind of teaching to become systemic in classrooms, how do you leverage how we will move away from Pong, which we are rapidly doing in everything but our classrooms, to the new reality of how we teach and learn, and also accommodate that it could become systemic for those kids that research says shouldn't be doing it? Did that make sense?
It does. There's a lot there. The honest answer is I don't know. I think in the last 10 years we've seen a significant increase in bring your own device. We've seen this vision that initially we had, Nicholas Negroponte at MIT had the one laptop per child vision, and that's when this conversation, I think, really started to get heated up. Then the smartphone leapfrog laptops, and raise your hand if you have a smartphone right now. It's every single one of you. I would be surprised if one person doesn't. If I asked that question 10 years ago, it'd be different data. So I don't know is the answer. Different school districts are wrestling with it. The digital divide is a component of that, especially in Appalachia, where if I asked that question in Northern Virginia, and I was in a room full of kids, every single kid would have an iPhone or a high-end Android device. If I go to Pulaski County, in where I live in Virginia, and I ask that question, those kids they're not coming to school with high-end ubiquitous devices. So there's that, and that's why the BYOD, bring your device, that's a partial solution. The answer is I don't know. That's a very complex idea and challenge, and I don't honestly have a good answer for it. This is the future. I think people, so there's another component of your question, which is, well, is this the right way to go? Should we be using these devices and these technologies in this way when there is potentially, although I think there's a debate to be had, potentially research emerging that says that might be detrimental to cognition, that might be detrimental to time on task and focus. That's a larger ethical question, but for me, I would say these are the tools that our kids are using regardless of what we think of it. We have to adjust and adapt accordingly. And in some ways, more importantly, this is the market. They're going to be expected to go into their respective field, whatever it is, law, medicine, whatever. Even certain jobs that we didn't think were tech heavy 10 years ago are very tech heavy now. So that's not really research based, it's just my opinion. I don't know if I answered it though. It's a complex question, I don't have the answer.
It was about 25 questions. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
You said pretty early in your presentation that in year one, the people who are taking the micro-credentials will have hours towards licensure renewal, but in year two, you're moving towards graduate credit. So what will be the difference between the micro-credential expectations in licensure renewal versus the grad credit? Will they have to do additional work? Because I'm just thinking of our own state, that there's a huge difference between earning hours towards licensure renewal, we call them CPDs, the professional development units, versus a semester-long course to get that graduate credit. So if you could just describe what that's going to look like, that'd be great.
Right, so initially we did not plan on offering credit. We were just going to be strict professional development points. But as we started to develop the content, so on the cyber side of the house, it's all credit. So there's certain U.S. Department of Education policies that we have to adhere to, one of which regular and substantive interactions with instructors. So that's a big one. If you've been following CBE, that's what Western Governors University got dinged on when they were audited. The research or the audit showed that they were not completely compliant with that. So that's relevant to your question, because if you go credit-based, it's a lot more complicated. It's a lot more stringent in terms of qualifying for rigor, and it should be, quite frankly. But initially when we proposed the grant, we did not plan on going credit-based. And so that's why in year one we said we're not going to do credit in year one. After we got the award, we realized that's a missed opportunity. If we can offer teachers graduate credit for their effort in micro, then we should do that. So that means internally we have to work it through the curriculum committee approval process at Radford University, because we're an accredited university, also shared governance, and so that process is underway. In terms of the other part of your question, what's going to be the difference between the first year of micros and the second year of micros, and then implied in that question, will it be retroactive to where if someone goes through in year one, could they get graduate credit for year one's effort, even though it's not right now established as graduate credit? I think that's going to be very difficult to do. I think more than likely, people that go through in year one, they'll get those PD points, they'll get those PD hours, and then we'll just have to be very transparent up front for teachers to say, if you're looking for graduate credit, that's not going to be available to you until year two. Does that answer?
I'm interested in the licensure renewal and just in the whole, not just licensure renewal, but in the assessment of the completion of a micro-credential, the process of who approves, and I know you have some grants, but how do you fund that? Because you can't just be volunteer labor that says, well, we'll spend hours and hours assessing people's micro-credential work. So, and I'm interested in everybody actually answering the question as well. How do you structure, how do you have build an infrastructure for assessing the awarding of that micro-credential in a way that is consistent and valid?
Yeah, so one of the second part of your question is a very huge, complex, I think a national dialogue question, at the very least a regional question. So I'm going to punt on that for a second. In terms of internally, we track all of the data when teachers are going through and they demonstrate mastery of a set of competencies, both on objective assessments and performance assessments. Then the internal assessments within the learning management system will be the criteria and the metric for them actually completing a micro-credential. We then would share those hours and with that completed or the time spent in the learning management system with their administrator, and then that administrator would then be the one responsible for saying, okay, this person needed X hours of professional development points that we can count it towards licensure. Because each state has slightly different rules in terms of renewal, licensure, et cetera. That's the way, what I just articulated is the way it works in Virginia. You get 180 hours every 3 years. In terms of the larger part of your question, that's a very important question. How is the validity of what KVEC is doing and what Digital Promise is doing, and what other organization is doing? I think there's an ecosystem emerging, but I don't think there's a standard yet. I think you're gonna have to have large national bodies weigh in on that. You're gonna have to have regional accreditors weigh in on that to a certain extent. I don't have an honest answer for how that's gonna shake out. But I think it's coming. Someone's going to set the gold standard for what a digital badge is and how it correlates with competencies that are nested within a micro-credential. In my opinion, I don't think that's been established yet.
But in the smaller piece, just the whole getting even to the point of, I complete a micro-credential, who approves it? Who says you met the criteria or you didn't? What's the structure you have for having this army of people it's going to take when you have thousands of teachers doing multiple personalized stacks of micro-credentials? You know, does anybody have a structure built for maintaining, keeping, supplying, paying for whatever, that kind of delivery of, you know, I did the micro-credential, who puts the stamp on it?
But my professional opinion on it right now is probably Digital Promise. It has, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but Digital Promise has probably the most advanced ecosystem for what you're talking about. In terms of the asset program, we're just starting. So all of our assessments are designed internally and aligned with our content. And we're not even at the point of establishing ourselves with national credibility in terms of our correlation with other programs. So I would say, in my opinion, Digital Promise probably has the most advanced ecosystem that's built out right now.
Quickly, I'm Jennifer from Digital Promise. I'd love to dabble in this conversation when I speak later this afternoon, so just keep that question and similar questions in your mind.
Matt, at this time, if you go back to those first set of questions you had, what I would like to do now, we have about 5 minutes, and at your tables, as you listen to the conversation that Matt just had, thinking about the questions that were asked from the audience about some of these concerns, I want you to look at it and have a dialogue with each other at the table. Other things to consider, we have some table facilitators out there. Where are the table facilitators? Okay, they're going to be spreading out quickly across the tables and helping. If you need someone to take notes, if there's one person at the table, they can do that for you. Just kind of jot down some of your thoughts, some of your ideas. And as Jennifer said, and as Gary comes up later, and Jennifer, you may have some of these questions for them as they go through too. So have this dialogue with each other and make these connections about some of the things you've heard, some of your concerns, and we have, I'll call time in 5 minutes. Okay? Thank you.
Well, it's second season on, even just like listening, like the questions that they're asking, and then like presenting discussions.
it's good for the whole group, about the PowerPoints. All the PowerPoints after today will be found on the holler.org in the micro-credential holler. Okay, 1 minute.
You've got 2 different laptops. I brought mine. I'll leave you with the clicker for whoever can use that. I'll just put it. No, I'm just grabbing this. Everything? Here, bro. I know it like that. Hey, no problem. Thank you so much. Oh, yeah, I will.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call time as we get ready to transition to our next speaker. Is there anyone at your tables, you have a burning comment based on your conversations with your folks and you really would like to have said? Anybody would like to volunteer to give their burning comment at this particular moment? Is this a burning comment? Okay. Okay, this is a question I think that everyone will be interested in. It says to Matt, which districts are participating in your grant? I know currently in Kentucky we don't have anyone, but Matt is here because, again, it's free. That's a word educators like to hear, free. He's looking for folks to partner with him as they're working on this grant. So if there's someone in here that you may want to say, I really wanted to contact this person, go ahead and send him an email now. You have the information, so it would be a good time to do that.
Or come find me. I'm right here.
And there are brochures on your tables for that.
I was asked to speak for our table, and if you raised, when I finished, you dealt with this issue, we'd like to see how many of you. What are the policy issues around this? What are the rule and reg issues? Is it going to be different for every state? Is what's allowed for one state not going to be allowed for another state? Or is everybody going to have to do the same thing? And at what point do micro-credentials not become micro-credentials if they become course credit, however stacked or whatever. So our view, or our questions, I'm not sure it was our view, but our questions were, can some of these issues be solved in change of statute, rule, and reg in individual states? And the answer to that is yes, because there are about 24 states that are already doing that, some leading the way and some taking advantage from others. Is Tennessee here? Oh, hey, how are you? Tennessee kind of started all of this work in Amy's shop, but you're leading it, and they've been very successful, but other states are as well. Will that make kind of an uneven track in the country about how the delivery systems happen and what's credited and not? But don't we already have it? Don't we already have that difference? Because states' rights and certification and prep rule. Will it affect comparability and reciprocity? Truly, we don't have reciprocity in this country anyway. If we think we do, we're crazy. But all of those questions are up to individual states, and Digital Promise, in working with states like Tennessee and others, are helping to solve some of those problems as they go along the way. So does the question then become, how can we learn from each other? We also dealt with the, for lack of a better word, threat to higher ed in the traditional way of doing things. So the next question was, how can higher ed work with this and not just sort of restructure and fit into an old mold?
Thank you. We have time for one more table at this time. If others would like to post their comments on the parking lot, we can read them out later. Anyone else have a burning topic from their table they just want to say at this time? All right, very good. Thank you, Madness. Please give Matt a nice round of applause. Okay, and in my effort to eradicate, like I said, deep vein thrombosis, now, I'm an HP guy. This is a Mac, and we don't like each other very well. There we go. So, if you would just indulge me for a moment, it's a very short, we'll go for 2 minutes as I get ready to set up for our next speaker. I would like for everyone at this time just to kind of stand up to get your blood flowing.
He wasn't kidding about the phone.
Again, some of you are loving this, some of you are hating this, but either way, I've got your brain working, so that's good.
Greetings, my friends. It is I, Maximo. And at this very moment, I am filled with gratitude, love, and a tasty bean burrito that I had for lunch. But enough about me. Stand with your feet almost together and your hands here in front of your heart. Very, very nice. Today, my luminous creatures, we are going to fly. So, shall we begin? Yes, yes we shall. Raise your propellers into a T position. You see, the T? Try to keep your lovely elbows straight. Gently rotate your shoulders and hips so your propellers glide from one side to the other side. All nice and propeller. Yes, move gently, move smoothly, move like a propeller. You are flying. You have total control as your belly arms rotate side to side, to side to side. Marvelous. Now, return to center and lower your arms. You've landed. Feel the stillness for uno momento. Breathe. Yes. Are you ready to take one more flight? Yes. Yes, you are. Return to T position with your arms wonderfully wide. Keep your upper arms where they are and drop your hands and forearms down. You might feel like, how do you say, a scarecrow, but you're not. You, my friend, are a propeller. Bring your hands toward each other in front of your face and bring them around in a circle. They go up, then wide, then down. Oh, those crazy, crazy propellers. Continue flying, my friends. Spin your powerful propellers round and round, truly circling in opposite directions if you like. But go slowly so your brain and body work together. It's tricky, no? Yes! This is Maximo Flight 123, asking for permission to land.
You are clear to land, Maximo Flight 123. You are clear to land.
Excellent. Circle 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Prepare.
I already got a bomb on the head.
So hey y'all, Lawrence County.
Report up. Is Michelle Mills. Michelle Mills leads the professional learning strategy for Tennessee's educator force to ensure the professional learning offered is personalized and meaningful. Her current work centers on the second year design and implementation of a statewide micro-credential pilot. Other areas of focus include an instructional partnership initiative and guiding the work of the Tennessee Professional Development Council on a new teacher induction framework. Prior to this role, Michelle served as the reading language arts teacher and literacy coach for Metro Nashville Public Schools. Michelle obtained her Bachelor's of Arts in Cognitive Science from Northwestern University, received her teaching certificate in middle school from the College of St. Mary, and completed her Master's in Education from Vanderbilt University. Her passions include professional learning, critical literacy, and engaging minority males in literacy practices. And I will have to say, as we've gone to Tennessee and met with Michelle and had conversations with her on the phone and watched her in action, when I talk about her work, and it embarrasses her, but I always use the word awesome, because what I see and what she does with her state and the work has always been awesome. So Michelle, if you can come be awesome for us, we appreciate it. None intended.
Well, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? Good morning. Good morning. It's so nice to be back in Kentucky. Kentucky is actually my home state, so every chance that I get to return, I'm always really excited. So I'm from Hart County, a few hours southwest of here, but I have a huge place in my heart for the entire state. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your time with me this morning. I am Michelle Mills. I am Director of Professional Learning Systems with the Tennessee Department of Education. And I'm really glad to be following Matt because I was here last year and talked about our pilot at the beginning and kind of what micro-credentials were. But what you'll hear today is really comes in at a very different entry point. So I know there are some of you who are still have lots of questions about what micro-credentials are and some questions about how they're assessed, et cetera. This is going to come in a little bit higher, at a higher level, but I'm happy to stop and answer any questions that you need answered in order to understand in order to understand the presentation. So please don't hesitate to interrupt me. I can pick right back up and keep going. So feel very comfortable doing that. But I did want to let you know that this is really an implementation, sharing implementation lessons learned after about 2 years of a micro-credential pilot. So without further ado, I'm also, other disclaimer, I'm also really a middle school teacher, so, we have to walk our classroom, so please, you can track me if you want, but as long as you're able to hear my voice, know that I will pop back up front, but I may be behind you or around you or to the side of you at some point during the next 40 minutes. In 2016, the Tennessee Department of Education really began in trying to fulfill its vision, which is here, that all students are equipped with the skills and knowledge that they need, really just to have the best path in life that they can, begin to explore competency-based learning and personalized learning for students. In pursuit of that, we have identified 5 priority areas, of which educator support is one, and that's the team that I'm on at the department. And as you can, well, it's a little hard to see here. I'm not sure why they chose yellow. Nonetheless, educator support, the goal is to support the preparation and development of an exceptional educator workforce. So in this conversation about personalized learning really for students, it didn't take long for our commissioner to realize that most of the teachers in our workforce in Tennessee have not experienced personalized learning firsthand. And so if we're going to ask teachers to implement this type of learning with students in their classroom, then it would behoove us to give teachers a personalized learning experience for themselves. And so it's kind of the perfect storm, because at the time that the commissioner was thinking about how can we offer teachers personalized learning in their professional learning, micro-credentials were beginning to make their way from other industries into education. They had actually been on the scene for a few years before we discovered them in 2016. But here's a quote from our commissioner. We talk about outcomes-based and performance-based measures for students all the time. Teachers need to experience and model this type of growth as well for both experience and the model for personalization. So that is how we arrived at the idea of piloting micro-credentials. And in 2016, the plan was to have a 3-year pilot that, well, really, that's all they knew. They just knew that we're going to have a 3-year pilot around micro-credentials. And fortunately, I was hired to help run this, design this, run it, and just kind of see what happens. So our big key questions became, we realized that we needed to first, let me back up. Our department is situated in a really tall office in downtown Nashville. My office is on the 12th floor. It's the top floor. We call it the pit house. And so, it's really easy to feel like all ideas are wonderful from that environment. We overlook the Capitol, and there's a green bicentennial mall, and it's really pretty, but we forget that we are not the ones standing in front of students. We're not the one turning in lesson plans and grading assessments and creating formative assessments. So it is critical to our work that every idea we get, we take to teachers in the field and find out how they feel about it, what's it really like, and how will teachers and students truly respond. So as wonderful as the idea of micro-credentials seemed from our office on the 12th floor, we knew that we had to take it to teachers, put it before teachers, and get their true and honest feedback before we made any statewide formal decisions around micro-credentials. So that's exactly what we've done for the past 2 years. We will continue to do that even into year 3, and that's what I'll be sharing a little bit with you today. So the major questions that we wanted to know from teachers: are micro-credentials of high enough quality to be considered professional learning? There's one, you can learn something that might not carry the weight or the gravity of being counted or deemed true professional learning. So we wanted to know from teachers whether or not micro-credentials provided that type of quality experience. Secondly, we wanted to know whether or not micro-credentials were rigorous enough to be granted points. We're already thinking maybe down the road we would be able to provide professional development points, but we didn't want to just hand out points for learning that wasn't necessarily rigorous. So that was another major question that we are seeking and that we have sought throughout the pilot. And lastly, of course, the big question always in education, two-pronged question. Does this impact your instructional practice? So does this change what you do in your classroom? And most importantly, does it impact student learning, right? So those are the huge questions that although you'll see that the pilot iteration has different iterations and changes slightly, these are still the fundamental questions that we are seeking to answer from teachers. We built this year's year 2, we built on year 1, where year 1 we piloted straight with teachers. So the department went to teachers and asked them to earn micro-credentials. We realized that a huge missing piece was, hey, someone in the district who knows what the heck these are and what is going on and how to use them at some point in the future if things turn out well. And so this year we added the layer of district capacity. And so our major goal this year was to build district capacity to leverage micro-credentials. And thirdly, we will continue to explore the role of micro-credentials in supporting teacher leaders. So the Tennessee has a teacher leader network, and we specifically have a micro-credential pathway that provides micro-credentials around teacher leadership. So that's a new area of exploration for year 2. As I mentioned, our key questions were, do educator micro-credentials impact the quality of teaching? Do they impact student performance? And what supports do districts need in order to effectively leverage micro-credentials at the system level? I was at a table with a young lady. I'm glad I included this slide because one of her questions was, what type of micro-credentials are out there? What's the content of these micro-credentials? These are the micro-credentials that we offer in one of our pathways. So I just wanted to give you a brief view or glimpse at some of the different content that micro-credentials provide. I will say that these are aligned directly to our teacher observation rubric. Indicators are, the top row are 6 of the indicators that our teachers most frequently need help with. So these are the greatest areas of refinement. And we went and curated micro-credentials from Digital Promise from their warehouse, and we incorporated them into our pilot. So you see everything from wait time to disaggregating data to growth mindset and kind critiquing. Okay. The second year, as I mentioned, this year we added a teacher leader pathway. And these are 4 micro-credentials. For this work, we partnered with an organization called Teaching Matters. They're based out of New York. But these are the micro-credentials that we offered our teacher leaders. And you can see they build on solid instructional practice, strategizing for assessment, and then analyzing student work. And they move then into the more of the traditional teacher leader work of planning professional learning and then shaping their role as a teacher leader. So in summary, that was the overview of our years of our pilot. I am happy to answer more detailed questions, but I really want to get into the lessons that we've learned. So I've saved the bulk of time to present to you or talk to you about the lessons that we've learned. But if anyone has if you're interested in the details of either year 1 or year 2, I'm more than happy to share those with you. But in summary, we've had a total of 15 districts to pilot with us. 280 teachers, and you'll see that we jumped significantly from year 1, which had 58 teachers, to year 2, which has 222 teachers now in our pilot, for a total of 280. We've also grown in the number of micro-credentials that were earned. So at the end of year 1, our teachers had earned 45 micro-credentials, and we were ecstatic about that. As of today, we have 181 micro-credentials earned by your teachers in the year 2 cohort. So that gives us a total of 226. Despite all this, we still continue to see, and I thought this was important to convey, about a 50% engagement rate. So, of all the teachers, let's see, yes, of all the teachers that agreed to participate in the pilot, which this year was about 270, about 50% or half of those teachers actually go on to earn a micro-credential or even start a micro-credential. So for those of you who are considering implementing this at the district level or in your school, I just want you to be aware that for 2 years in a row, we are seeing about a 50% engagement rate. So don't be disappointed. Yes?
I have a clarification question. Is it 50% successfully earn or 50% apply?
Great question. And the answer is actually 50% actually send in evidence they start a micro-credential. Yes, you're welcome. Did everybody understand the question and the answer?
No.
Okay. So her question was, is it 50% of people who submit evidence earn the micro-credential, or 50% of the people who say, I will be in the pilot, submit evidence? And it's the latter.
So were they required within their district to participate? Or, so at the district level, what percent participated? And then of that percent, you're telling us 50% completed micro-credential? I'm confused.
Okay.
Start back at the beginning with the district engagement.
So we encourage districts to allow teachers to be purely voluntary. So we do not encourage districts to force or compel their teachers to participate in micro-credentials. And so on a voluntary basis, we had a total of, across the state, we had a total of 222 teachers that say, I would like to be in this pilot. And of that number, half of them actually went on to submit evidence to earn the micro-credential. Now, some of those were denied, some were resubmitted, et cetera, but they worked on the micro-credential as opposed to saying, yes, I'll participate and never doing anything. Okay. Any other clarifying questions? Okay. All right, so there are, 9 or 10. Here are the lessons learned, and we'll walk through each of them, but just a quick overview of what we've learned after 2 years of piloting. I'll give you a second to glance at that. And I think this will be, Robert, these slides are at the holler, right?
They will be.
Okay, they will be, so, fantastic. Also, I'm happy to send these directly to anyone who is interested. I would send them to you as well. Okay, so let's jump right in. Lesson 1, collaboration matters. We have, I use the term overwhelmingly positive. So at the end of year 1, we asked teachers, we gathered their feedback, how was this for you? How did you like micro-credentials, et cetera? And the response was overwhelmingly positive. But we did something very intentionally during year 1 that we didn't do year 2, and that leads us to this idea of collaboration matters. Year 1, we recruited 30 teachers to participate, and then as part of the pilot, we asked them to go and find a partner with whom to go through this experience. Okay? So we built in the collaboration definitively by pairing teachers, or by requiring that teachers go and find a partner. Okay? We did not do that for year 2. So year 2, you may join the pilot and earn micro-credentials. And what we found at the end of year 2 is that those who collaborated with a partner either first year, which was required, or that paired up or found a buddy during year 2 that wasn't, although it wasn't required, had a more positive experience. This doesn't necessarily mean that they earned more micro-credentials, but they felt better about the experience. So they told us, I would definitely do this again. I've grown and learned so much from my partner. We now share lesson plans, and so the benefits actually go beyond the individual micro-credential that they earn and has impact around their entire teaching practice, almost like their little culture. So teachers who work closely reported a more positive experience. And on the flip side, those who worked alone, although they may have earned the same number of micro-credentials, their recommendation was, hey, is there a way to build some collaboration into this pilot? It would have been really nice if I could have worked with someone else who was going through this process. So collaboration matters. Number 2, district support matters. As I mentioned to you, year 1, the state went straight to teachers, and I led all the feedback sessions, I did all the training. They came to us, or I went to them, without anyone in the district knowing. They knew that a pilot was happening, but other than that, that was pretty much the touch point. So this year, we built into the pilot that in order to participate, the superintendent of the district had to appoint what we call a pilot coordinator. So this was our point of contact in the district who knew what was happening. They recruited all the teachers. We sent them the material, but they really ran the training sessions. And by training session, I just mean the introductory session. This is a micro-credential, et cetera. And they were really a strong point of contact throughout the pilot. And what we saw is that districts whose pilot coordinators were more engaged had a significantly stronger success rate. So more micro-credentials were earned. Their teachers felt better about the experience than those who were less engaged. Now, I realize my language may come across as that this is like really deep, quantitative research. It's not. So when I say, our results found or what we saw, this is anecdotal data. We didn't have, a research component, strong research component behind it. So I just want to clarify that with the language. But we did find that definitely district support matters. Messaging matters. It's really important. So in the state of Tennessee, we understand micro-credentials to serve 2 purposes. Number 1, micro-credentials can demonstrate a competency that a teacher already has. We are okay with that. We want teachers to be able to be recognized for a skill that they have or something that they do really well in the classroom. And if a micro-credential serves that end, we are happy and proud and excited to be able to offer that recognition to teachers. The second purpose of the micro-credential, which we recognize, is that it's an opportunity to have new learning, right? So what we found that matters throughout our pilots is the way you message that is actually very important. Because if a teacher feels that they're going to gain new learning from the micro-credential experience, they're going to go into it with a different mindset than one who goes into it seeking to demonstrate a competency that they already have. Does that make sense? Okay. So specifically what we found is that our teacher leaders, it was messaged to them, that message wasn't very clear to our teacher leaders. So there are lots of skills that they possess. For the 4 that I showed you, strategizing for assessment, analyzing student work, most of them already had that down. It was part of their daily work. But because the message wasn't very clear, they felt that they would be learning something new. And they were disappointed when they did not necessarily learn something new, but more demonstrated the competencies that they already had. Okay? So messaging matters. And I would just encourage you to be very clear, those of you who are thinking about, again, implementing this in your district or in your school. Teachers are either in or out, and this alludes to what I was saying earlier about the 50% engagement rate. So what we found is about half of all the teachers actually will start the process. But what's very interesting is those who start the process in our pilot generally earn not only 1, but multiple micro-credentials. So if they valued and appreciated the process, they truly valued and appreciated the process, right? So they demonstrated that by earning multiple micro-credentials through our pilot, and most of them actually have indicated that they would like to continue in the pilot or at least earning micro-credentials next year. Whereas those who never submitted, obviously never submitted. So what we're seeing after 2 years is that teachers are either in or they're out. And that doesn't mean that a teacher who I'm describing as out won't get in. It's, maybe life circumstances, that maybe, we don't know why they have chosen not to engage. That doesn't mean that they will never engage, but it means that until they do, they usually don't. And once they do, it's very likely that they will more fully engage. Any questions at this point? Fantastic. Incentives actually matter. Imagine that. Teachers wanting to be incentivized for work they do. So the background here is that Tennessee actually did change our policy. We had this crazy rule that professional learning, prior to micro-credentials, professional learning done during the workday could not be counted toward professional development points, cannot be counted toward renewing or advancing the license. Well, that goes a little bit against the grain of what we know about the most effective professional learning, right? That little thing about being job embedded and practicing over time and collaboration. So fortunately, we have a state board who was willing to listen and understand that that was not in the best interest of teachers. And so we did, in January of 2017, I'm proud to say, change policy so that a model of being job embedded, practicing overtime, collaborating during the workday with your colleagues, that type of learning now can work toward advancing or renewing a teacher license. So we offer professional development points for each micro-credential earned, and we're very excited about that. So, but that was really the beginning. We wanted to say, and really message to teachers, we value this, that we find this important enough to offer you something in return for your work and your effort. It turns out that that's really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of incentives. So that will be enough for some teachers, but it won't be enough to really engage all teachers, as many teachers as we're hoping to. So at the district level, we learned from our pilot coordinators that they had found some really creative and very inexpensive ways to add additional incentives. And I've listed some of those here. And you'll see they are as small as putting the teacher names in a district newsletter. Go figure, right? Just having my name and someone recognize that I'm doing this work, that I'm, kind of going above and beyond here. Additionally, some of our districts have recognized teachers at their school board meetings. And so that's another chance. There aren't a lot of teachers that necessarily engage with the school board, but that's a really cool opportunity to get those two groups together and for something positive as recognizing professional growth. So those are just a few examples. This badge designation is an interesting idea. One district plans to, I don't know the logistics, but this is their plan, to print little stickers that they will put on their work badges to indicate that, hey, I have earned this, I have the skill, I've earned this micro-credential, and so everywhere they go, people will be able to see and know that they've done that work. So these are small things that when we talk about incentives, money is great. We, at the state level, hope to incentivize those who begin to assess for us. It's a slightly different conversation. But those who assess for us, we want to offer them, we want to pay them. But we realize that not every district has the funds for that, and so we definitely want to share ideas of ways, even small ways to incentivize teachers, where the teacher will say, okay, at least they're trying. The funding isn't there, the budget's being cut, but at least they're willing to recognize some of this effort. Other incentives are released from additional duties. So instead of doing bus duty in the morning, maybe I'll get someone else to cover bus duty. so you can spend time working on your micro-credential. These are other ideas that our districts have shared with us. I think one of my favorite ones that the teachers really appreciate is this alternative to district PD. So they're really beginning to recognize this micro-credentials as learning, and many districts are, some districts are allowing the substitution of you don't have to attend this district PD, but you do need to be in your classroom working on the micro-credential. And teachers are really appreciating that opportunity. And then some others that are a little less developed, but are different possible career pathways. So we talked around maybe you will, if you earn a certain number of micro-credentials or particular micro-credentials, you can be considered for the leadership team, or you can be considered for this role or that role. So there are lots of things, thank you, lots of different ways to really show teachers that you value the work that they're doing around this learning. So the other things matter. Local experience and support helps. And I intentionally put this word here, helps, instead of matters, because teachers want to know that someone in their district, region, or state has done this work. Has anyone else in Tennessee done this? Has anyone else in Henry County earned these micro-credentials? That's really important to them. At the same time, they also value the idea of collaborating with teachers in other states across the nation. So it's not that they don't value that, but there's a security that they find in knowing that someone else in my region has earned the micro-credentials. And I say that to say that when we started the pilot, our answer was, no, not yet. So it was really important for us to emphasize that although no one has done it yet, you will be that person for someone else. And so we really just kept iterating how important it was, how important their work would be to other teachers throughout Tennessee. You are breaking ground. Your work is really going to be very valuable in helping us make decisions and policies to affect all the other teachers who haven't earned this yet. And so they, after hearing that over and over again, they became more comfortable with being guinea pigs. And I think we really saw how important their role in this work was. But it's very important that we continue to iterate to them. No, it hasn't happened yet, but you are leading the way. And likewise, teachers want to know that it can work in their classrooms. Virtual communities are hard to build. So before we had multiple teachers in a district earning micro-credentials, we had a virtual community. And teachers really wanted that and thought it was a great idea, but once it was in place, they really didn't engage with it. We saw that year one, and they asked for it, and we saw it again year two. So it's comforting to teachers to have the virtual community theoretically in place, but I think the life of being an educator is just really challenging to navigate, and we did not see a high level of engagement around the virtual community, although teachers asked for it. What we found, and we hope will be more successful than other models, is that providing coaches or facilitators to schedule one-on-one sessions is more productive or more effective than having like a synchronous session for them to all come together. So the asynchronous has really been more helpful or more effective than a synchronous session as far as virtual community is concerned. Go slow to go fast. Anyone in here who's thinking about micro-credentials at your organization or your district or in your state, it is critical that you and your team spend time developing your own vision. What are the needs what are your needs that micro-credentials will help you solve? Or what are the goals that micro-credentials will help your organization reach? I say that because what you'll find is, Matt mentioned the word so. So there's kind of, micro-credentials are new and they're becoming exciting to lots of people, and they have lots of ideas and want to jump on board and be part of it and participate. But it's important not to let someone else's desire to engage derail your vision. So it's critical that you know why you are doing micro-credentials, and even if the idea shifts, it's critical that you know what you, kind of the direction in which you want to go. For example, in Tennessee, we introduced micro-credentials as voice and choice for teachers. Okay? There's a very different philosophy, and it's not better, it's not worse, but there's a different philosophy that talks about different pathways or more structured micro-credentials. And those are competing. It may be a way to manage both of them and navigate both of them, but it's going to take very intentional decision-making and intentional strategic planning. So knowing what your purpose for micro-credentials is, whether it's at the school level, district level, state level, on up, it's critical that you know how you want to use micro-credentials. Right. Okay, almost. Micro-credentials have, believe it or not, they have benefits and challenges. Imagine that. So some of the things that we found early on, the benefits of micro-credentials, is that our teachers felt that they did improve their instructional practice, which we were thrilled about hearing, because had this answer been no, I would not be in front of you today, because we would have gone a different direction after that first year. But over and over again, our teachers reported, even the veterans, we had teachers with 2 years of teaching experience, all the way up to 19 and 26 years of teaching experience. And the response was similar. I improved my instructional practice because of the micro-credential that I earned. Or worked toward, that's important too. They did feel that micro-credentials were rigorous enough, that were worthy of being counted as professional learning. And I thought this continues to fascinate me. So even when a teacher submitted evidence for a micro-credential and did not earn it, so they got feedback to say, great start, but you don't have everything that you need here, or you need to go back and take a look at this, they still found the experience valuable and learned from the process of earning the micro-credential. We heard that year one, we're continuing to hear it year two, and I think it's fabulous. It really demonstrates a true growth mindset that we not only need as teachers, but we also want to be able to impart to our students. Some of the challenges quickly, and there are other challenges, but after the first year we found that this might be overwhelming for first-year teachers. It could be. You can see how, they're trying to keep their heads above water. This isn't true for every first-year teacher. We have first-year teachers that earn micro-credentials, but across the board, we did hear several times that this might be, especially if they're earning it independently, a bit overwhelming for that first-year teacher. Teachers need some guidance around video uploading. We intentionally chose micro-credentials that required audio and video upload. We think that's a really good practice. But there are some technical supports that they will need, that some of them will need in order to navigate this successfully. And lastly, micro-credentials can feel isolating. You don't have to, there's nothing about the micro-credential that says you have to work with other teachers. You could, be on an island earning them without anyone else knowing what's happening or knowing what you're going through. And so our teachers gave us this feedback, and that's why we're working very diligently to make sure that we include some type of collaboration within, we want to marry micro-credentials and collaboration. We want teachers to think about collaborative experience when they think about micro-credentials. And lastly, our last lesson is that teachers really want meaningful learning. Here are just a few quotes. I won't necessarily read them to you, but this teacher, as far as her observation is concerned, she got 3s on questioning for 2 or 3 years in a row. She worked toward one of the questioning micro-credentials and actually got a 4. I was totally unaware of this, but she was so excited, and she said, I got a 4 this year. And I really think it is because of the micro-credential. She says, oh, by the way, my lesson plans got better too. Hey, we'll take it. This one talks about how deliberate, this is a veteran teacher, how deliberate he had to be when earning the micro-credential. He thought that he is a strong teacher. He thought he would just kind of be able to wing it a little bit in all honesty. But he said, no, I really had to be deliberate about the evidence that I chose knows the work that I submitted to earn the micro-credential. And of course, that made us feel, that reassured us on that these are really being assessed. Someone is actually looking with criteria and standards on the other end, and not just handing out these badges right and left. So we feel very good about that. Again, this one talks about the prep required. She says, we need that to be something more than I'll just turn in this lesson plan. Teachers realize that turning in a lesson plan has very little to do with what happens in a classroom, the interactions between a teacher and a student. And so it gets back to this meaningful learning. They want experiences that actually help them grow. And I love how she said this. It puts you in a vulnerable spot, but it is really powerful. We encourage our students to take risks. You have to take risks to grow. And so it's so powerful when teachers share with the students, hey, I'm trying to earn this micro-credential. I'm learning something new. Will you all be part of that learning experience with me? They see the teacher, talk about model. They see the teacher stepping out on a limb and taking that personal risk in order to grow. And that has a tremendous impact. And lastly, this teacher is talking about the feedback and how much she values the feedback. Feedback is really good. It showed me where I messed up. And this is particularly in response to a video that she had submitted. She said, I like seeing where I messed up and exactly what I need to fix. It revealed something about my teaching style that I didn't know about myself. So teachers really are finding value in this type of learning and meaning in this experience. I have quote after quote after quote. I could obviously didn't want to put you to sleep with them, but I'm happy to share any of those. But our teachers continue to give us really positive feedback about the experience of earning micro-credentials. Speaking of teacher quotes, if you want to hear more about how teachers feel about micro-credentials, these are great. Digital Promise has done a fantastic job of capturing podcasts about teachers' experiences with this type of learning. And then Bloomboard also has some educator quotes. If you choose to access the presentation, you can click those links that will take you directly to those spots. So.
Michelle, there's also a recent blog post from a Tennessee educator that I realize I haven't sent you yet, but folks should definitely check that out too.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I really hope that those of you who are interested in thinking about micro-credentials, that you take the step of faith that is required because this is so new. My greatest desire for that is because it is impacting teachers. And again, I said, I continue to be a teacher at heart. I hope and pray that we can, that we can re-professionalize teaching because there's been so much damage done by the public and in the media. We deserve better. We deserve more. As Robert said, we are truly shaping the future, and we touch lives every single day. And we need something that really works for us as learners and something that will make a difference in educator lives. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I failed to put my number here, but if you email me, I will get back to you, I promise. This presentation will be available with the others that Robert puts on the holler. And are there any questions?
Yeah, we're going to take about 5 to 6 minutes for questions.
Okay.
And then if you have a question we don't get to, put it in the parking lot and we'll get to it later that we can come back to as well. But as she said, any questions, thoughts you have for Michelle at this time? And I forgot to say this, but please introduce yourself when you ask the question. Now I'm going to come back here to the MISIC folks so they can introduce themselves. Dr. Fletcher.
Robbie Fletcher, Superintendent of Lawrence County Schools, and also Chairman of the Board of Directors here at KVEC. I'm going to ask 4 questions, and I'm going to ask them all consecutively because they're related. The first question is, what is the level of coaching for people that are in micro-credentials? And the reason why I ask that is, do they have to reach a certain point before they can submit? And then the second question is, are they allowed to resubmit if they didn't pass, if they were denied? And then what's the time frame for resubmission? And then is there a number of times that after 3 times they can't resubmit anymore? So those are all tied back to, first of all, do they have to reach a certain threshold before they can submit? If they're denied, are they allowed to resubmit, and then the number of attempts at that point, and time frame?
Okay, fantastic question. I'm going to answer these in response to Digital Promise micro-credentials because there are other micro-credentials and other platforms whose policies vary a little bit, but I'm going to respond to those with Digital Promise. So the level, in terms of level of coaching, that really depends on the teacher. Some teachers are more independent and they kind of want to know, they don't want anyone to know, and so they'll submit and just see what happens, and that's perfectly fine. Other teachers want to get it right before it's judged, so they will share with a colleague in the building. They'll reach out to our virtual facilitators and get feedback. So there's no requirement on the coaching. Yes, they may absolutely resubmit. As far as I know, and Jennifer can correct me if I'm wrong, we are completely unaware of any time frame. So they can submit as many times as they need to, just like we want students to be able to work and improve it until they get it right. That is the current environment. And there's no limit on the number of times that are resubmitted or the length of time. So for example, if, God forbid, if you have a tragedy or something and you're in the middle of a micro-credential and you need to put that on hold for 6 months, a teacher can walk away for 6 months and come back. They may need to start afresh, but theoretically they could pick right back up where they left off and submit and do that. Good question.
Hi, Melissa Biggerstaff from Green River Regional Educational Cooperative in Kentucky. What types of data are you collecting around the student impact learning that you spoke to that ties back to your key questions in the beginning?
Great question. So right now, the data around the student impact is all anecdotal. It's just all anecdotal right now. Tennessee does have a statewide, we have TVOS. So if we have the capacity and the time, and we hope to do this, but we don't have the funding right now, we should be able to link teachers who have earned micro-credentials and how their students perform. Theoretically, the systems are in place. We just haven't gotten to the point where we're ready to access that and have someone look at it quantitatively. So 2 years maybe? It will probably be about 2 years before we are at that point. Good question. If there's anyone in the room who can provide funding and would love to do that, we are open.
Matt said he's doing it for free, so
He said definitely not doing that
right.
for free.
So as you're thinking through her presentation and later when you look at it again on the holler.org, again, it's www.theholler.org, and you go to Hollers and you will find the micro-credential holler, like hollow, but it's the holler. You will find all of these, and you can send her email. She does respond to you quickly. But let's please give Michelle a round of applause. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it. Okay, our next presenter, as he's walking up here, is Gary Chapin. Gary is a senior associate of the Quality Performance Assessment of the Center for Collaborative Education. He is coming to us from Maine. He supports practices, policy, and strategic efforts to create systems of assessment that are truly equitable. In this role, he supports teachers and educators at every level of practice to implement performance assessment systems. He was the founding researcher developer of the Maine Department of Education Center for Best Practice, where he conducted case studies of 5 school districts and 1 regional collaborative, engaged in transformative work around proficiency-based, learner-centered practices. Gary's work focused on the systems change process, policy, and communication. He has spoken at several conferences and has co-authored several publications, including Created Proficiency-Based Learning Centered Systems in 2014. He earned his BA in History from Rutgers University and has a Master's in Educational Leadership from the University of Maine. And I'm glad to meet you, and it's all yours. Thank you, Gary.
That's me. So, hello? How are you doing? If I had known he was going to read that out loud, I would have written it really differently. Amusing. So, thank you for having me to Kentucky. I come to Kentucky improbably often. I work with Jefferson County schools, and so I've been to Kentucky a lot. For a guy from Maine, I have been to Kentucky a lot. Is David Cook here? Not yet? Okay, I thought he was coming. So thank you for inviting me out, and I'm going to approach this a little differently. Michelle and Matt were great, and so the Venn diagram is overlapping ever more. So I'm going to take opportunities for improvisation at times because, and I also want to invite you to be sort of like co-conspirators in the learning, and just interrupt me and ask questions if I'm not clear. I find this stuff genuinely fascinating. I really do. So sometimes that takes me down a rabbit hole because I'm thinking, and that's really interesting. Okay, so if you need to pull me out of the rabbit hole, that's fine. While Michelle and Matt were talking, I was making a list of things that keep me up at night. That was the list about micro-credentials, and we're going to talk about that too. So, I am from the Center for Collaborative Education, which is in Boston. I work in Maine and then travel all over the country. And we are a nonprofit on equity. We started by talking about schools, by working with schools in Boston, and then in Massachusetts. And then when I came in, we started working with rural schools because my experience is with rural schools in Maine. I find the problems of rural schools to be really fascinating and interesting. We think that teaching and learning should be purposeful and have value beyond school. There was a time when that was controversial. We think that assessment should demonstrate the competence of students in multiple ways. And we think that collaborative practices improve teaching and learning, and I would even go further and say collaborative practices are essential. They are non-negotiable to teaching and learning. And so we are the Center for Collaborative Education. I particularly am in sort of like the assessment wing of the organization, so I focus on performance assessment. This is quality performance assessment is the name of the division, and we focus on how to do performance assessments that are valid and reliable and sufficient. So, so I need to tell you that we are not a micro-credential shop. When Dan French, my boss, said, we're going to do this grant about micro-credentials, I said, micro what? And I meant it because I hadn't heard. This was a couple of years ago. So I have been where many of you have recently been. And so we are not a micro-credential shop, but we are a performance assessment shop. And so micro-credentials, in case you haven't heard, micro-credentials are a form of performance assessment. So that'll become important later. Just hold on to that for a little while, let it sink in. So I want to talk about performance assessments for a little while. I had wrestled with, should I include this? I almost threw out the entire thing while I was sitting over there because Matt and Michelle were bringing up such interesting points that I wanted to respond to. But I wanted to talk about performance assessments specifically before I talk about micro-credentials, if that's okay. Yes, okay? Give me something, people. Come on. Oh, affirming. Thank you. So why performance assessments? Because assessment drives curriculum and instruction. This is a fact that we know. This is a true thing. Whatever you assess is what kids should be learning. And if they're good assessments, that's not a problem. So assessment drives curriculum and instruction. Other reasons are standardized testing is crazy. does not close achievement gaps. No Child Left Behind certainly identified achievement gaps, but then it didn't do anything about them. You may have noticed this, but your students are more diverse than ever before in the history of mankind. And they need more diverse ways of learning. They also are being asked to learn things at a deeper level than ever before. And I mean, you may have noticed there are a lot of deeper learning conferences going on. That's a new thing that we're asking students to do. And we're also looking at higher order thinking and 21st century skills, which is something that haven't been assessed in the past, or at least not officially. So what we try to do is we try to help people create assessments that promote complex thinking and applications of learning in real-time settings. So you're not just showing us that you know something, but that you know how to use this thing that you know, or this skill. I'm going to skip that because that's technical. So performance assessments can be written products, they can be a research process, they can be a science lab, they can be graphs, charts, and tables, they can be speeches or artistic products. Career and tech centers are a hotbed of performance assessment. They do things like say, do you know how to fix this lawnmower? Fix the lawnmower. That's crazy talk. That's amazing. And then there's other. And I put the other in there because we need to be willing to be surprised by our kids. And our kids, if they are engaged, they will come to us and they will say, I know how I can show you how to do this thing. And then it's our job to make it work with the system. The system is secondary. If a kid comes to you, you act as the agent to translate that performance into what the system requires. So that's other. So we're going from silence and isolation to communication and collaboration, which used to be called cheating. We're going from things that kids have to do to things that they get to do. We're doing things where scoring is secret and external. Okay, how many principals in the room? Principals, raise your hand. Wow, I am shocked. Okay. So packing up state tests into a box and waiting for the UPS guy to come and show them this is something that principals do. And then the boxes get shipped to a bunker in Nebraska where they're scored, and 6 months later you get the reports back just in time to not be able to use them. So in the new narrative, achievement is transparent. There's one myth about education. There's a mythical goal, a holy grail, looking for the objective assessment, and I do not believe that such a thing exists. I believe transparency is what we need, and transparent to the students, transparent to the parents, transparent to the community, the teacher, and other teachers, so teachers can look at each other's work across classrooms. A kid should not be surprised about their score. They should know what they got because they have the same rubric you have. They can do self-assessments, they can do peer assessments, and they can do reflection. So we're basically moving from evaluating learning to driving learning, assessment for learning as opposed to assessment of learning. So take a breath. Are we good? Yep, okay. You with me still? All right. It's going to get deeper. This is Linda Darling-Hammond's chart. And one of the things that I get from teachers who hear me talk and they get a little worried is they think that we're saying that everything students do need to be over here. This is the level of complexity of assessments. That's what the chart is. And they're thinking we're saying everything needs to be this performance assessment. And that is not true. Many types of assessments work in a performance assessment system. If you're doing biology, at some point you're going to have to do vocabulary. But ultimately, this is where we want the students performing. So that's the vision of a performance assessment culture, is that Over here you have things like senior projects, or fixing the lawnmower, or performances, and over here you have short constructed responses and factual knowledge. And I would argue that all of this stuff here, sorry, I'm getting in the way, should be formative. All of your low cognitive level stuff should be formative. You should not be assessing anything that they can Google for keeps. You need to check that they know it, but writing it in the grade book and averaging it in later is kind of an abomination. Just saying. I'm a bit of a fanatic about this. Just, you know what you're getting, right? Okay, good. So I wanted to show you an actual performance assessment in action. I didn't test this beforehand. I hope it works. Oh, I'm not going to be able to. Tech guy, where are you? Mr. Tech Man. Okay. Hey, so there's a video there I'd like to show. And there's going to be another one later. I don't know why. Okay, actually, I'm not going to find it because that'll take too much time, and there's got to be conversation going on here. So I'll summarize it for you. Okay. So in Poland, Maine, which is in the mountains of western Maine, they have senior capstone as one of their exit requirements, but in order to build up to that, every year has some sort of performative aspect starting from 5th grade. They have a thing at the end, and it's in order to build up skill so that the senior capstone is not the first time they're encountering this. So in the 8th grade, they do History Day, which is something that many of you might be familiar with. It's a national thing. And every student does a performance assessment around some topic in history. The goal is, the question is, why is this a turning point in history? So people can do like Malcolm X, Hitler, there's always somebody who does Hitler, Amelia Earhart, all sorts of things. And right. So then they have the performances, and we bring in 30 people from the community to come and jury these performances. And then the entire school for that day looks at these performances and juries them, and the kids talk about it. And so this is sort of a huge performance assessment, but it's extremely effective. They touch on any number of ELA and history standards, plus if somebody does a mathematician, then they can get some math standard work done in there, plus all the 21st century skills about research and following up. So that's History Day. And also every kid in the school does it, including the most disabled kids. Everybody is on this day. So that was a great video. Okay. Any questions so far? And so can I ask you, what is your experience? Who here has had experience with performance assessment? Doing them, or what has been your experience with them? Oh, look at you. I'm calling on people. Oh my
They
God.
used to be an integral part of the assessment system in the state of Kentucky, so I dare say 99% of the people who are serving have either administered, or if they're very young, they were probably part of the classes that did them as normal assessments. Everything I said, everybody already knows.
Oh, he's trying so hard though. So, Right, managing time. You really have to, and this will sound like I'm joking, but I'm not. You really have to embrace chaos if you want performance assessment to be a part of your life. I saw a hand over here.
I think a key lesson that we learned is that tying it to the outcomes, the targets, the learning instructional targets that you have, sometimes the project becomes a living thing rather than the standards, the learning targets that you want. So it becomes more of a doing stuff rather than really the learning that you want kids to walk away with. So it's that careful alignment between that performance assessment and the learning you want them to have that's critical.
Right. I cannot stress this enough. With personalized learning, competency-based learning, and performance assessment, you must start with the standard. And I see people nodding. You're probably lying to me. You're probably thinking like, yeah, but I want to do the Civil War. There is no Civil War standard. I mean, there may be here. There's not one in Maine. There are, sorry, I just caught myself. Okay. So you might have favorite units that you want to do, so you have this unit that you've always been doing, but and you'll make it fit. It's like the muffler commercial. We'll make it fit. And but you have to start with the standards. So, for example, there was a physics class in Monmouth, Maine, a senior physics class. They wanted to do a final senior exhibition, a senior project. So there was a lake in the town that had an island on it that was a nature conservancy, and so they decided to build an outhouse on the nature conservancy. And so this became a huge project. The entire senior class got involved, and it had all sorts of standards attached to it. They attached geometry, because obviously there's the planning, construction standards, planning standards, civic standards, because they had to get zoning and permission, fluid dynamics, because it's an outhouse, there's fluids, and so all sorts of materials standards for chemistry. And this became this huge deal. The entire senior class did it, and people were figuring out how to tap into this project to meet standards. Another one is in Vermont, there's a school that teaches, they use seminars, they have seminar classes, and one of the seminars was fermentation. So they made kimchi, pickles, a bunch of stuff. I'm not a fermentation expert. No whiskey. We don't do that in Maine. They might have that here. So they were using this real life project. Okay. So my point, and I do have one, is that the project, the micro-credentials that we designed they are performance assessments, but they're also about performance assessment. So, phew, that took a long time for me to get there. You guys are fun.
A question about the videos, since you have another one that's coming up that probably won't work either. Is it possible that you might be able to get those to whoever administers the holler?
Yes, yes, yes. We have series of videos.
I saw you coming, Robert, so I shut up.
Oh, Robert. I feel like he called it. I feel like we're at this secret meeting in eastern Kentucky. It's like we're meeting on an island in the Seychelles, and the special prosecutor's going to be wondering why, how come Digital Promise and CC are in the same room? That can't be a coincidence. So here's the project. Oh, really? This is the project. So the Assessment for Learning project began as this, I learned about it through the request for proposals, and it comes from the Center for Innovation in Education, which is here in Kentucky, and also Next Generation Learning Challenge. They started with 12 projects throughout the country. Very different projects. Ours was the only micro-credential one. It's not like the project was designed to promote micro-credentials credentials. But all the projects are promoting the idea that assessments should tell the story of what a kid knows. Assessment shouldn't be a punishment, it shouldn't be a reward, it should be telling the story of what a kid knows. And this is something that I'll come back to again and again, telling the story. So a couple of people have said, well, this is just qualitative evidence, or this is just anecdotal, but it's also storytelling, which is super powerful, and you were super powerful when you were telling your story, so don't sell yourself short. Here are some partners, Henry County Schools in Georgia, Jefferson County Schools in Jefferson County, Kentucky, you knew that. And also some schools in Rhode Island. And so why are we doing micro-credentials? What's the problem for which micro-credentials are the solution? I'm asking you, why are you in this room? I'm going to ask you to, at your tables, talk for 2 minutes about what's the problem that you came here to solve? So, go.
Under your boxes is a sheet with the first question. If you'd like to put those down for him, go ahead.
Probably for me, what do we have available to offer teachers what exactly the process looks like? We're aware of the process, and it's obviously different places, different processes. Tennessee, it looks like it's more state partner, whereas Kentucky is just. And then once you get into that, what exactly uniformly can we offer? What can we offer in the rest of the university? How much does that cost us? What can we offer for campus? What can we offer for alumni? That really gives, if you want to find things like learning, you might have a lot of options. So we offer these 4, and then you can call it individualized learning. Because then you're just going back to the OPD model. You know, how many PDs have you guys sit in that you're like, I've either done this 3 times already, or this doesn't apply. 3, you're probably not going to not even apply to anything.
Go Steelers, I don't know.
And then what what's supposed to be.
On the way from Friday, we tested when you have to look forward to it once we're finished with our alternative. You know, there are certain things that I feel that are weaknesses that I'm interested in learning about. We talked about RTI, I'm interested in learning how to apply better, how to data better. So I think that, being able to pick something that I'm interested in, and I know that will help me professionally.
Okay, so come on back to me. Come on back to me. Quiet coyote. Quiet kangaroo. Is that better? Quiet possum. I gotta tell you, I get more criticism for how I bring a room back from talking than anything that I do. If I shout, people are like, don't shout. If I go, shh, they go, don't do that. You know, so you're quiet coyote, and they're like, what? No, it's quiet possum. So, I swear to God, I am not trying to be condescending if that's the way you're receiving this. So, over there in the back there, what is some of the what is the reason you're here? What is the problem you are trying to solve? And wait for the microphone, please.
We talked about a closer connection of, in terms of this the problem, a closer connection between student learning and teaching and teacher learning, and also that micro-credentials allow access to what the teachers really need as opposed to perhaps what the district's offering.
Right.
And Darcy Patrica from West Ed.
Hey, from West Ed.
West Ed, AC.
Oh.
when it came in today, the biggest thing with Robbie Fletcher, Superintendent of Orange County Schools, what can we offer our teachers that is not just another way of developing and implementing PD? For example, we can only offer teachers four offerings through a micro-credential. That's not really individualized learning. That's just doing the same PD we've done over, just in a different delivery method. Now, so again, what is available to our teachers, and then also too, what's the rigor, what's the quality of what's being offered?
Thank you. Down front right here. Wait for the microphone.
Emily Fox, Illinois State Board of Education. We talked about a couple of different struggles that the state of Illinois is having. One is that prep programs can't possibly prepare educators for everything that they need to know on the job. So micro-credentials will help ensure that job-needed knowledge is present in all educators. Also with teacher leadership specifically, our districts have said that they value micro-credentials over getting an actual degree or completing a higher education program in teacher leadership because they can specify requirements that are specific to addressing district needs. Access is a big thing too. Illinois is a really diverse state. A lot of our schools are located in rural areas. These educators may not have access to institutions of higher education for additional credentials and coursework. Therefore, micro-credentials, particularly offered in the online format, are of utmost importance. And finally, we have an early childhood gateways credential that we are looking into issuing via micro-credential rather than just through completing higher education programs.
That was very comprehensive. Thank you. Anybody else have something they feel?
Emily Fox, Illinois State Board of Education.
Just making sure. Nice to see you.
Any other folks have a response that they feel hasn't been reflected over there? She's also enthusiastic.
Jennifer Darrell, I'm here at KVAC, and we had a pretty in-depth conversation in that short amount of time. But I think something that we haven't mentioned is we keep talking about micro-credentials for teachers, but in our state, there is a need for clinical, personalized professional learning for principals and administrators. And micro-credentials can also help to impact the professional learning of those educators and help them become the lead learners in their schools and districts and model this pathway for their teachers.
Yep. Yep, and also badges for students, don't forget those. I'm working with Del Lago Academy near San Diego, making STEM badges in collaboration with the local community college so that the badge will transfer directly. They're actually designing it together and with local people from the biotech industry. So that's pretty exciting. That's a lot of people to negotiate, and it's quite the challenge. All right. Can I go on?
No.
No? Oh, sorry. Oh my gosh, I didn't even see. Sorry.
My name is Cindy Stevens. As you were just talking about your work, I was thinking about dual enrollment and the transition for teachers both at the higher ed level or tech level or wherever and the high school level. And at least in our state, where sophomores can do dual enrollment, there isn't anything going on to really prepare teachers to make that transition, either of whom they're teaching or where they're teaching or how it's going about. So would you see that based on what you just said about your work with all these people, an integral part?
I would say that there's definitely, aside from whatever technical work we're doing, there's definitely a cultural, I don't know what the word, diffusion that has to go on where they have to learn about each other. For example, every badge in this school has a reflection element, a metacognitive. The student writes about how did they learn what they learned. And so we were talking about this, and somebody said, well, we could get rid of the metacognitive element. I was like, no, you can't. And then people from the community college said, well, why do we care how they learn? And I was speechless, as improbable as that sounds. So I said nothing, and then one of the teachers rescued the situation, thank God. That was a really hard moment. That was a hard moment where the difference between the cultures was stark. All right, feel free to say no again. Can I go on? Okay. teachers are historically unsatisfied with professional development. You've all seen the surveys. For micro-credentials, teachers have agency in choosing the course. And the most important one to me is that teachers demonstrate proficiency rather than seat time. They actually, I mean, think about that for a second. They actually demonstrate that they are proficient. And also, micro-credentials are a model of performance assessment. So just like Michelle said, they are experiencing performance assessments as they do performance assessments. So just like they have the experience of the personalized learning, you said it, so I don't need to repeat it. This is just our definition of a micro-credential, digital badge that is earned by demonstrating competency of a specific skill. All of our micro-credentials are on Digital Promise. I don't know if they're on the new site yet. They're supposed to be on both sites. They are. So they're on the new site, so you can go look at those. They are very interesting. So in phase one, what we did is we created 9 micro-credentials about performance assessment. And we implemented them in Rhode Island with 7 schools, 45 teachers, 22 of whom completed it. And it was an amazing, amazing experience. Michelle, I found your presentation very affirming. But so, and the idea was just, for the first phase, the idea was just like, well, let's just see these micro-credentials and see how they do. So these are the micro-credentials that we did. We have 3 stacks: performance assessment design, advanced performance assessment design, and leading a performance assessment learning community. And we asked every teacher to complete 1 stack. I mean, every participant, if they volunteered, we said, would you please complete 1 stack? And just like Michelle reported, even though half of the people dropped out, everybody who participated completed a stack. Even though more than 30% of them had to resubmit, they did. They resubmitted. And every one of them earned the complete stack. That was very, that was really cool. Okay. So what we learned in phase 1 in Rhode Island was that teachers genuinely appreciated the respect that's inherent in micro-credentials, letting you choose. There are audiences out there that we did not expect. In Rhode Island, apparently, adult ed teachers have no form of certification. And we did not, this is a problem for them. They feel like they're not taken seriously. So we had 8 adult ed teachers begged to be on this project, even though they weren't part of the original group. And they all completed, and that was super cool. The other unexpected audience, so we did this in Rhode Island, in 7 districts in Rhode Island, with 45 teachers in Rhode Island. Our first submission was from Wisconsin. And apparently they were on Digital Promise. Some teachers in Wisconsin found them and said, hey, let's do this. You never know. Kettle Moraine, Wisconsin, surprising people everywhere. Teachers were overwhelmed by the complexity of the micro-credentials. Now, this is not the same thing as saying the micro-credentials were too complex. It may be the same thing as saying that. But we also heard people say, well, I really thought I could just, look at it and I would know. I would, throw everything on the floor and I would figure it out. Our micro-credentials, we can get into a long conversation about contact hours. Ours, we estimate, take around 10 hours to do. So they are substantive and they're rigorous, and just following the instructions was hard for some teachers. Just knowing that they had to follow the instructions was unusual for them. Every teacher who submitted and was denied resubmitted and was granted, which told us something about the feedback we were given. And we had wondered, how are you going to give this anonymous feedback in writing over the Digital Promise platform? Will it be effective? And it was. And for those of you who wonder who was scoring, it was me and one other person in my office. We did all the scoring. And we even wrote an article about it called 5 Things We Learned While Scoring 120 Microcredentials. I urge you to look it up. It's on my website. At every site, teachers form PLCs to work on their microcredentials. We did not require this. And it was something, the microcredentials themselves require that they work with other teachers. Nobody works alone. But they all form PLCs or use their existing PLCs. And not only did the PLCs make the microcredentials better, but the microcredentials made the PLCs better because they had something to talk about that was important to them. You can't PLC a PLC. You can't write writing. You have to have something to talk about. And in this case, the microcredentials created that. So 5 things I learned while scoring more than 100 microcredentials. Teachers are so traditional, and whenever we gave them a choice between a video or an essay, every friggin' time, essay. We're like, we're gonna do whatever you want. You know, multiple styles of learning. Come on, go crazy. Essays. That's all we got. I swear to God. Okay. Everybody got this? Logistics are hard, by the way. So that scoring question is one of the things that's keeping me up at night. Things that are keeping us up at night. Currency and grain size. So if you're ever in a room with micro-credential designers and it feels awkward and you want the conversation to pick up, just say grain size, and you'll have an hour of conversation right there. Am I wrong? How micro is micro? What, how small is it? Is there a micro-credential for bringing the crowd back from a conversation? There's a micro-credential for wait time. There are micro-credentials for, or is there a micro-credential for how to found a school? There's not. But what is the appropriate size of a micro-credential? And then the currency is what is it worth? We have been, every state is different. Somebody said, do all the states have it the same? No. Every state is different. And so there are PD points, continue ed points. Wherever we can get grad credit, we do. Digital Promise has an avenue for many of our micro-credentials to get grad credit, plus we're working on partners in Kentucky and Georgia and Rhode Island. Because grad credit is a unit of exchange that everybody thinks they understand, so they're willing to work with it. So that's a really useful way to go about it if we can. Oh, this is me being overnight. Oh, wait a minute, there was more. Oh, right, I wrote it down here. What keeps me up at night? I've got my bullet journal. The role of instruction. Somebody over here asked, is there a threshold they have to meet before they submit? And we worry about what level of support should we give. We give a ton of resources in the micro-credential, but let's say a district wants us to come and do some PD and then do the micro-credential. Is that okay? That seems to be deviating from the radically individualized learning that a micro-credential is supposed to represent. So, and if a person receives no instruction but the evidence they submit is fine, then why shouldn't that be okay? If they resubmit, why do you even need to know they're resubmitting if the evidence is okay? If the evidence is okay, that should be it in my radical world. And also, what promise is the micro-credential making? Is it saying that they are a master of this thing? Can we say that after 10 hours of experiencing this that they are a master of this thing? That's not what we're saying. We're saying something else, but we just don't quite know what it is yet. So phase 2 is we're working with districts. This is what's going on this year, phase 2 of the grant, to try and create systems around micro-credentials that actually answer these things. And Matt and Michelle talked about this very effectively, so I'm going to try not to repeat. We're working with, I already told you we're working with. So the idea is how do you make it a part of your system but not your whole system? It has to be voluntary, otherwise you're giving up on the very idea of a micro-credential. They have to be able to choose a pathway. And so all of these things are questions we're facing. So we're revising our stacks, and we're writing a 4th stack around equity. We already created one about ELs, working with ELs, and then we're going to have 2 about cultural responsiveness. We're going to work to systematize these, and that always creates this tension because the more you systematize it, the more guardrails you have, and the less individualized it becomes. And we're going to provide orientation, and we have a research team that documents the experience. This is the timeline, and it's crap. Everything takes longer than you want it to. This is ridiculous. Oh my God. Kentucky, Jefferson County, make me crazy. Somebody decided that the board had to vote on whether or not to do this pilot in Jefferson County. And then, so the board didn't approve it till March, so the entire year passed away. It was very frustrating. Meanwhile, little tiny Rhode Island just scooting along, beating everybody. And here are resources for you. All right. So, first of all, thoughts? I know, it's broad. Yes.
So, I'm Erica.
Oh, wait. Because they for history.
So this is just kind of a bigger picture question, and I don't know if you can answer it, or maybe like digital promise or something, but I got excited in your last couple slides where you're working on equity, because that's going to be a piece that we're doing the work in Illinois. We have a seed grant, and we're going to be developing micro-credentials on leadership work for equity, and partnering with Tennessee to take their Leader for Equity playbook and make those into micro-credentials. So as this is growing, I'm wondering, is there a way, I mean, especially as you're working with leaders and an issue of such substance as equity, is there a way that there's a connection then to other micro-credentials that they could either go through or they could send their teachers to? So like, for example, as we're working with principals on Leadership for Equity, one of them is cultural responsiveness, and I would love to just have a way that they're automatically connected then to the micro-credential that you guys are doing on cultural responsive teaching. So is there a way that this can like all be networked? You know, especially, I mean, I think one of the benefits of a platform like Digital Promise is that it's free and accessible, you know, nationally or internationally. And so if there's a way to create that network of going deeper and deeper into it, I think there's a real benefit.
Thank you.
I don't know who answers that, but it's just something I want to throw out
Well,
there.
there's the start of a network. I mean, obviously we network with Digital Promise, and we've hooked up with an organization called 2Revs. We use some of they have online courses, and we're listing those as resources within our micro-credentials. We did number 2 REVS. And we did a white paper on different experiences around the country, and we talked to Tennessee, and they are part of that white paper. So we are talking to each other. It's not quite there yet. Other questions? Okay, so we're gonna have.
Just one thing, because one of the reasons we're here from Iowa, and we're a nonprofit organization of about 130 school districts in Iowa. All voluntary, we're kind of a membership-based organization. We receive no funding, we have no grants, so everything is just membership from the district. So I'm jealous of all of you who have grants. But we are really jumping in with not just both feet, but our whole bodies. And we have on our agenda 208 micro-credentials that we're starting work
Designing.
Wow. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, I'm Sue Beers, I'm with MISIC. It's really an acronym that has lost its meaning because it was mid-Iowa, but now we're all of Iowa and beyond. So now we just say impacting students, improving curriculum. So our role is around curriculum and instruction. We've used a lot of things from Illinois. We've stolen a lot of stuff from Illinois in the past and helped. But we think in our role now in micro-credentials for us is to get in the hands of our teachers, and the 208 topics that we're starting to look at, they're not all in development right now, but are on the list, all came from our teachers and our administrators saying, this is what we need to know about. This is what we need to learn about. And so we're really trying to enroll as many as we can, and we're looking for partners who want to do kind of a free exchange of things. You know, you've developed some things, there's no need for us to redevelop those, and you've developed things and no need for us to redevelop those. So we're hoping that we can find partners that we can grow and exchange and benefit from each other's use.
Great. I didn't even talk about the design process, and I'm not going to, except to say that it also took much longer than we thought. And also, if you don't field test them, they're not done. The field test has been ridiculously informative. I did not want to be that informed by the field test. So that was very important.
Nick Such from Awesome Week in Lexington. I'm an engineer who stumbled into teaching. But it seems like one of the really, there's a big push to make micro-credentials available online, so you can be anywhere and access them as the learner in that situation. But the assessment seems very manual and painstaking, and maybe a limiting factor in a lot of people adopting this. Is there any progress in terms of automating or augmenting that to make that process a little easier on the reviewers?
I'm not interested in making the process easier for reviewers. They're paid. So the process for all of ours are embedded in the classroom. So if you create a performance assessment, it's not something that you can say, okay, let's stop our learning and we'll do this performance assessment now. It's all in the classroom, so it all exists in the real world. So there's going to be that, the messiness of the meat world to always. But you're right. Otherwise, it really is download the PDF, create your own documents, upload them, and then the scorer looks at them and reads them, or looks at the video. And that's what it is. I don't know. I don't personally have an interest in automating it because I feel like education is a really intimate activity, and I don't think it could be. Automated. What we're talking about.
So perhaps there's a lot of value in that review process. Things that you learn from that.
I think so. Especially everyone gets reviewed by two people.
So whenever, I think probably one of the things that, hi, I'm Lisa Hood from Illinois State University. I think one of the things, like when you do performance assessments, and my involvement both in developing and doing performance assessments, it's really important to have that rubric, so no matter who uses, whoever's doing the assessment, you have that reliability and accuracy,
right.
So that, thinking about Michelle's, what sounds like they're using a merit system, so that reviewers know the difference, or assessors know the difference between a 1 and a 4. Can you talk about a little bit maybe about that rubric development process and making sure that assessors have that inter-rater reliability?
Well, inter-rater reliability is generated, part of it is a clear rubric, but part of it is processes. So our 4th micro-credential is about calibration and inter-rater reliability, and it requires raters to meet and calibrate every so often. It's not even, you don't even just do it once, you do it every so often, just to make sure that what you say is proficient is the same thing as what you say is proficient. And that calibration session, we've been told, and I see it in the room, is the most valuable PD we do, is getting people to talk about student work is amazing. It's such a good time. So we think reliability is a function of this process, not a function of following particular rules. Like, we can make a checklist for validity, but we can't really make a checklist for reliability. It has to be that process. Matt?
I just wanted to piggyback and try to address Nick's question. So I think that's a hardy debate, right? The idea of scale and cost control, as well as the authenticity and validity of the assessments. And so I think there's a debate that's going to be had nationally, and it's going to be data-driven. Right now, I mean, I know that Digital Promise and others use a very rigorous assessment process, but to your point, it's also labor dependent. It's dependent upon experts in the field who are highly trained. You come with an area of expertise, and I think that's honestly one of the strengths of a Digital Promise assessment system. That being said, and I can't speak for Digital Promise, but at some point, there's going to be, we're looking at this overall nationally within the competency-based movement. When you have an assessment system like that, there are ceilings on scaling potentially. And there are ceilings on when it becomes just cost prohibitive. When you're trying to run a scalable operation, you have to start thinking about, well, how much does it cost me to use a distributed faculty model? So if you just forget about micros and just look at CBE in general, most of the big universities that are doing this, Western Governors, Southern New Hampshire, Texas A&M, some of them that are dealing with tens of thousands of students, they're wrestling with this exact question, which is, okay, what's the distributed faculty model look like? Do I pay my instructor to do X, I pay my assessor to do Y, and I pay my instructional coach, who's usually just there to do support, something else? That has not been solved yet, and that needs to be solved if we're truly going to start looking at artificial intelligence, for example, as a way to address some of these scaling issues. We have to start being open to the idea, and I know this is where it gets hotly contested, especially in education circles, myself included. We don't like the idea that, and we're not ready to acknowledge that it could be just as valid to have an automated assessment system relative to a human-driven one. And I think we need more data collected to draw that correlation, but that's coming, that has to be part of our, we have to be open to it. We have to say, hey, look, can we scale this with machine learning in a way that we can't scale with human assessment?
There are two ways we're approaching this. One is, in Jefferson County, they're trying to create, we're helping them create a sort of an inner pool of teachers who will serve as scorers. And we would love, because our goal is never to be in the district forever, is that when the grant goes away, when we go away, that they have created a sustainable system within, so that their PD dollars, that's where they're putting them, their Title II dollars, whatever. So that's one of the things. Another way to do it is using Digital Promises, pools of reviewers, or Bloomboard's pool of reviewers. I mean, we figured it takes about, between the two reviewers, it takes about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes to score one of our micro-credentials. Especially if it's a good one. The good ones always take the longest. Because they write the best reflections. Then you send it to somebody and say, this is so cool. Hey, guys, I'm done. It is, thank you so much, and I'll talk to anybody who wants.
We always put the third speaker in a very precarious place because it's lunchtime. But I think you did a good job with that dry wig here. I think that's hilarious, and I appreciate it. One of the things I do want to say is, as we talk about professional development dollars, those of us in Kentucky know exactly how much that is. We know right now it's zero. So, and when we think about our micro-credentials, and currently with Digital Promise, unless there's an assessor fee, it's $0 for that. As we look at collaboration within programs like with Asset, that currently is free. So there are opportunities for advanced, job-embedded, competency-based, deeper learning that's free. And with the KDE's work, Todd Davis is here from KDE. He may know more about this later if you want to connect with him, about the professional development pilot in Kentucky, where we could work on, the districts can work on a professional development plan that's job embedded in lieu of the 24 hours. and then we have free on top of that. So there are things to have conversations about that may be happening in your states as well. So let's give all three of our morning folks a round. And with that being said, I believe lunch is Val in there? I need to see her very quickly. Hey, Val, could you give her just 1 second? She said to me prior to this meeting, "Don't you dare do this." Well, as the younger brother of older sisters, you can't say that to me. But anyway, I can't tell you how much this lady has helped me getting this room and all the organization and contacts and hotels and everything else and the food. So can we please give Val a hand? She says she owes me one. All right, Val, how would you like for them to go through lunch?